Chapter 28. As he gradually regained consciousness, Ji Dong felt as if his body was enveloped in a scorching energy, as if he was soaking in a hot spring with a very high temperature. As he slowly opened his eyes, he was surprised to find that all he could see was a fiery red color. Both his body and his body were warm, and he felt very comfortable being enveloped in this scorching heat. His consciousness gradually became clear, and everything that he had experienced before he fainted was still vivid in his mind. Suddenly, as if he was being pulled by some kind of force, Ji Dong felt his body keep moving upwards. With a splash, he seemed to struggle free from something, and the red color in front of him faded away. Only then did Ji Dong realize in shock that he was not soaking in a hot spring at all, but in a golden red lava lake. There was also a layer of red light surrounding his body, and it was because of the protection of this light that he was not melted by the lava. "Do you feel better?" The flaming bar's gentle and pleasant voice rang out. Hearing her voice, Ji Dong immediately felt as if his entire body was filled with energy. He could not help but call out, "Flaming bar, where are you?" After experiencing a near-death experience, he had never longed to see the flaming bar as much as he did now. At this moment, he understood even more deeply that he was no longer the carefree Leathering who could give up his life just to taste the best wine in the world. In his heart, she was also the first existence that surpassed wine. The red light quietly bloomed, and the familiar figure seemed to step through the void, appearing in front of Ji Dong in one step. With a gentle wave of her hands, a gentle energy lifted Ji Dong's body up. Looking at the flaming bar, who was half a head taller than him, Ji Dong's emotions surged. He instinctively grabbed the flaming bar's hands and said, "I thought I would never see you again." The flaming bar broke away from his hands without a trace, and patted Ji Dong's head, saying, "It was really dangerous this time. If it wasn't for your good luck and strong battle awareness, I'm afraid you really wouldn't be able to see me again. You humans are really sinister. It seems like you have to quickly increase your combat ability." The flaming bar broke away from Ji Dong's hands, and could not help but feel a little disappointed. The feeling of inferiority filled his heart again, and the surging emotions from before quietly disappeared. He said, "Flaming bar, why was I in the lava just now?" The flaming bar said, "Although you defeated that person, you overdraft yourself too much, and your origin was injured. I placed you in the lava lake at the Earth's core to recuperate. That way, your origin yin-yang corona wouldn't degenerate due to overdraft." Ji Dong looked at the golden sun and black moon brands on his palms and said, "You saved my life. If it wasn't for the scorching sun devour and the dark moon claw, and without the two ultimate fires, I wouldn't have been able to live to see you again. I wonder how Lu Jun is doing." The flaming bar said calmly. The combination skill of two ultimate fires broke through his defenses and struck his vitals. What else could he have done? Ding Si's netherworld spirit fire would have completely melted his body, just like how he wanted to kill you without leaving a trace. Right now, all traces of him have disappeared into that forest. "He's dead?" Ji Dong looked at the flaming bar in shock. The flaming bar smiled and said, "Why? Are you nervous about killing someone for the first time?" "It's Ji Dong." Ji Dong shook his head and said, "Lu Jun has already gone mad. It's best if a scourge like him dies. I just didn't expect the effects of two ultimate fires to be so powerful. His magic power is 16 levels higher than mine." The flaming bar's expression suddenly turned serious and he said, "If that's what you think, you're wrong. Although the Bingwu primordial yang sacred fire and Ding Si's netherworld spirit fire are ultimate fires, and can suppress low-level flames of the same element, the most they can help you is to contend against your opponent with the yin-yang corona of the same rank. You were lucky to be able to kill him." As he spoke, the flaming bar waved his left hand, and a layer of red light condensed in the air. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a round disc. The center of the disc lit up, and an image appeared. It was the scene of the battle between Ji Dong and Lu Jun. The entire image started from the moment Lu Jun launched the corrosive fireball, but at a very slow speed. The flaming bar pointed at the blue fireball and said, "He didn't use his full strength for this attack. At most, he used 30 to 40% of his magic power. It's obvious that he didn't want to kill you in one go. Otherwise, if he used his full strength, even if you could offset the fourth fire's attributes, the energy that was several times more than yours would be enough to tear you apart in an instant. His level is twice yours, but you have to know that the increase in magic power for each level is not constant. A level 29's magic power is at least 4 to 5 times that of your level 13 magic power. This is not something that can be made up for with an advantage in attributes, but it's precisely because he wanted to kill you that he gave you the chance." The image continued until Ji Dong was blasted away. Under the control of the flaming bar, the image zoomed in on Lu Jun's face and she said, "Did you see that? The suppression of your third Wu primordial sun, holy fire, on his attributes gave him a huge shock. This person obviously doesn't have much battle experience, but he still let you rush towards him. Moreover, at this time, his heart was already extremely scared, and he actually chose to defend passively. Even I didn't expect that when the two sovereigns' standard skills, Scorching Sun Devour and Dark Moon Claw, landed on the same spot, the resulting effect was so strong that it broke through the layer of magic power. Moreover, you were able to quickly connect the two skills, and explode your attack power beyond your level. Throughout the entire process, if he could muster up the courage to attack you with all his strength, even if it was just one attack, you would be dead. Not only you feel lucky, I also feel lucky. If I was facing two sovereigns at the same time, I'm afraid we wouldn't have the chance to meet each other." Speaking up to here, the flaming bar's left hand swiped across the screen, and the image in the air disappeared. She lowered her voice and said, "Before you leave the Fire Academy, stay here with me. You must first complete the first stage of magic skill training. I didn't tell you before, but as long as you can practice Scorching Sun Devour and Dark Moon Claw 1,000 times, you will be able to learn these two skills, which is equivalent to the two sovereigns' skills evolving. Do you remember how many times you practiced them?" Ji Dong said, "Before I met Lu Jun, I practiced these two skills 512 times each. I practiced them every day in the academy. After I used Scorching Sun Devour and Dark Moon Claw, I only had 30% of my magic left. It's not enough to use them again. I need to cultivate and condense my magic before I can practice them again. So I can only practice about 8 or 9 times a day. At night, I don't want to waste time practicing magic skills, so I absorb the 2 fire elements to increase my magic." The flaming bar's eyes revealed a seriousness that Ji Dong had never seen before. She lowered her voice and said, "There are 9 days left before you leave for the Middle-earth Empire. In these 9 days, even if you don't sleep or rest, you must practice these 1,000 times. The fire element in the Earth's core lake is abundant, which can help you recover your magic quickly. Moreover, you should have more experience in the use of Scorching Sun Devour and Dark Moon Claw after your previous performance, so you can use them better. In these 9 days, you cannot have any time to rest, and I will always supervise you. Only with these 2 basic skills can you better protect yourself." Ji Dong nodded and said, "I will definitely work hard. However, Flaming Bar, I want to return to the academy every day. After all, I can't let the teacher on duty think that I'm missing. At most 10 minutes will be enough." The Flaming Bar said, "All right, time is pressing. Go back to the academy first, then come back immediately and start." "All right." Under the Red Lotus's escort, Ji Dong quietly returned to the academy. It was the holidays now, so no one would actually notice whether he was in the academy or not. If it was someone else, they would definitely go to the small forest to see if Lu Jun had really died without leaving any traces. However, Ji Dong didn't, because he didn't doubt the words of the Flaming Bar at all. After hurrying back to his room, Ji Dong immediately went to the back of the bar, washed his hands, and picked up the familiar mixer. This was the real reason why he fought for 10 minutes from the flaming bar every day. When he called out the flaming bar's name again and returned to the Earth's core lake, there was a pink and blue cocktail in his hand. The flaming bar took the cocktail from Ji-dong's hand, and a rare glint flashed in her eyes. She said, "Ji-dong, did you go back just to make a cocktail for me? Don't say that you don't want the teacher on duty to worry. You know, I can see everything about you." Ji-dong scratched his head. "I still owe you 95 years, how can I just cut it off like this? Besides, it didn't take up much time, I'll start practicing now." The flaming bar patted his head out of habit. Although Ji-dong felt helpless about the flaming bar's action, it was undoubtedly a good thing to have physical contact with her. It had been 4 years, he was used to it. A layer of dazzling red light shone from the flaming bar's body, and turned into a stream of light that shot towards the Earth's core lake below them. When the light entered the Earth's core lake, a loud rumbling sound was heard, and the entire underground world seemed to tremble. Not long after, under Ji-dong's astonished gaze, an irregularly shaped boulder with a diameter of about 30 meters slowly emerged from the magma lake. The boulder was dark red in color, and as soon as it emerged from the magma, it caused the already slightly distorted air to become even more illusory and hazy. The flaming bar brought Ji-dong down slowly, and floated next to the boulder that was 10 meters high from the magma lake. In an instant, the flaming bar's eyes turned crystal red, and Ji-dong could vaguely see illusory red lotus petals opening up in all directions. Then, the flaming bar swung her left hand. The pale red blade of light drifted out, and looked like a thin layer of red muslin. It swept past the center of the boulder that even the magma could not melt. The boulder did not move an inch, but a bright red line was left in the center. The flaming bar retracted her left hand and swung it upwards. Instantly, the bright red line rose, and the boulder above turned completely red. Then, it turned into red light spots and scattered in the air. Even the most beautiful fireworks were not as dazzling as the scene before them. The red light spots flew up and formed a red bridge between Ji-dong, the flaming bar, and the flattened boulder. Such an incredible scene was enough to intoxicate anyone. Below them was the magma lake, and in the center was the boulder that was as flat as a small island. This bridge that was completely condensed from energy stretched across the sky. The flaming bar's long dress swayed gently, and she brought Ji-dong along the bridge. With the help of the dense fire element, they arrived on the boulder in the blink of an eye. "Release your mana, or else you won't be able to withstand the temperature on the stone platform. Remember, you have to maintain the appearance of releasing your mana to continue cultivating. You can start now." Ji-dong nodded. With a thought, the origin yin-yang crown in his chest that had recovered its vitality shone brightly, and the yin-yang vortex continued to spin. Of course, he did not need to use the divine yin-yang lock technique in this place, and directly released all of his mana. The yin-yang crown that shone with black and white colors appeared above his head. However, whether it was the crown star or the flame brand on the crown peak, they had become a combination of black and gold instead of the original red and blue colors. Just as Ji-dong released his mana, the flaming bar also retracted the shield that was protecting him. Although he had already released 2 types of ultimate fire, Ji-dong still felt a scorching heat rising from his feet. He did not dare to delay, and immediately began practicing the benchmark skill. He took a step forward with his left foot, turned his body halfway, and threw a punch with his right hand. Every bit of Bingwu primordial yang sacred fire in his body followed his movement and condensed into his right fist. His right fist instantly turned into a brilliant gold, and suddenly struck the air, causing the surrounding air to ripple due to the high heat to spread. Ji-dong only felt that the speed at which his mana condensed had increased compared to when he was practicing previously. This caused the speed at which he released the scorching sun devour to increase, and his mana was also compressed in that instant. There was no doubt that the more the Bingwu primordial yang sacred fire was compressed, the more powerful the attack would be. After throwing a punch, Jidong took advantage of the momentum and stepped forward with his right foot. At the same time, he waved his left hand, and the black Dingxi netherworld spiritual fire appeared in the shape of a claw. It brought along a ray of light that looked like a black light slash. The two attacks were connected extremely quickly, and the mana in his body surged out. "You're so stupid. You've been practicing for 2 months, but you're still not completely right." The Flaming Bar's stern voice was heard. It was the first time that the Flaming Bar had spoken to him in such a tone. Apart from feeling curious, Jidong's heart also tightened. Apart from letting him cultivate here, helping him condense the yin-yang crown, and giving him the memories of the two great sovereigns, the Flaming Bar did not really give him any pointers. At this moment, the Flaming Bar did not leave just because he had started cultivating for the first time. It was obvious that he wanted to guide him personally. Chapter 29. Although Jidong had a stubborn personality, it didn't mean that he was stupid. He understood that the Flaming Bar was here to guide him because she was worried about his near-death experience with Lu Jun. Jidong was already very satisfied that the Flaming Bar was worried for him. He made up his mind that no matter how difficult the next 9 days were, he wouldn't retreat. The Flaming Bar walked in front of Jidong with a wine glass in his left hand. His stern gaze was filled with immense pressure as he said, "Remember, when using any skill, you have to be completely focused from the moment you start. Although you've already started to activate the mana in your body when you take a step forward, why didn't you activate it with all your might? Why did you only activate it when you threw a punch? Just this flaw alone will cause you to lose 10% of your mana. Also, when you used Scorching Sun Devour and Dark Moon Claw, why did you release both types of mana at the same time? Didn't I already tell you that with the yin-yang vortex, you can change your mana into a single type at any time? Only then can you unleash the full power of these two benchmark skills. Their power will be at least 30% stronger than it is now." Jidong was shocked as he said, "You're saying that I have to first convert all my mana into Bingwu Primordial Yang Sacred Fire, then after I use Scorching Sun Devour, I have to convert all my mana into Dingxi Dark Spiritual Fire and use Dark Moon Claw? The conversion between these two extreme attributes will take a long time. It'll be very difficult to connect these two skills." The Flaming Bar snorted coldly and said, "That's because you're not proficient enough. Even these two benchmark skills are close combat skills. Not only do you have to have enough attack power, you also have to be fast. Your biggest problem now is the method and speed of exertion. When you faced Lu Jun, you actually achieved the requirements I mentioned earlier with the last 2 attacks. However, your previous 2 attacks were far from it. Carefully feel the memories of the 2 sovereigns and continue practicing." Jidong's difficult days had begun. The Flaming Bar's gentle and tranquil attitude had disappeared in these 9 days. The platform in the center of the Earth's core lake echoed with the Flaming Bar's reprimanding voice at Jidong. "Are you a pig? Is this how one exerts force? How many times have I told you? From the moment you're about to attack, you have to mobilize every ounce of strength in your body. Can't you change your way of thinking? Don't you think that using the Dark Moon Claw before using the Devouring Sun would be more effective? Is the paralysis effect of the Dark Moon Claw just for show? Don't try to release your flames. You haven't reached that level yet. Doing so will only waste more mana. Idiot, with your current mana, you should be able to use 2 sets of benchmark skills under normal circumstances. Why is it that you can only use it once before running out of mana? Why don't you think about it properly? There are so many fire elements here, but your recovery is still so slow. Can't you use your mind to guide more?" Similar voices never stopped in the 9 days. The Flaming Bar had turned into the strictest teacher. Even if Jidong made a slight mistake, she would point it out angrily. He practiced over and over again, sat on the ground to recover mana. Ji Dong had no idea how much time had passed, but his biological clock would always remind him at the right time that he had to return to the academy for a few minutes. Flaming bar, I should go back for a while. Ji Dong supported his body and climbed up. His eyes had already turned completely red. The flaming bar frowned at him and said, "Okay." The red lotus swept over and teleported Ji Dong's body away. The moment he disappeared, the flaming bar's expression relaxed. She drew a circle in the air with her right hand. As the light flickered, the scene of Ji Dong shuttling away under the protection of the red lotus appeared. "Ji Dong, don't think that I'm too cruel. I don't want to feel heartache again. Do you know, that day when you were about to be killed, I couldn't save you. I've never experienced that kind of heartache before. It was then that I realized how afraid I was of losing you. You're about to go to a foreign place. Only by having the power to protect yourself can you better survive in the human society. Even I don't know what I see you as. Friend? Younger brother? Or something else?" The flaming bar's body trembled slightly as she mumbled to herself. Her gaze froze as she stared at the light screen. She clearly saw Ji Dong crawling to the back of the bar. He grabbed the edge of the bar and struggled to stand up. His body and arms were shaking non-stop, but he still picked up the shaker. He bit his lower lip and his bloodshot eyes were filled with determination. He opened the shaker's lid with difficulty and took a bottle of wine. He wanted to pour it into the shaker, but his hands were shaking so badly that he couldn't control his movements. For a bartender, it was impossible to make a successful drink if his hands were not steady. It had been 9 days, and Ji Dong had been training without sleep or rest. Even though the extremely rich fire element in the Earth's core lake had replenished his mana and even replenished a certain amount of his physical strength, his mental state was already on the verge of collapse. Ji Dong's blurred consciousness was already somewhat unable to control his hands. However, he didn't give up. He picked up a high-wave glass and smashed it on the bar. The glass shards flew everywhere. Ji Dong picked up a sharp shard and stabbed it into the fingertip of his left hand. This was the moment when the flaming bar's gaze froze. The fingers were connected to the heart. The intense pain stimulated Ji Dong's mental state. He didn't waste any time. He didn't even care about the wound on his finger. He took advantage of this short period of mental clarity and quickly poured a few types of wine into the shaker according to the ratio. Why do I have a sore nose? Is this how humans feel when they want to cry? But I don't know how to cry. Why does it feel like my throat is blocked? Ji Dong, are you really the devil in my life? No, I can't. I can't go on like this. Otherwise, I might not be able to leave him in the future. It'll only be more painful. The flaming bar waved her hand and dispersed the light screen in the air. Her eyes flickered as if she had made a decision. Not long after, Ji Dong returned to the geocentric lake with the red lotus. He handed the cocktail in his hand to the flaming bar. The flaming bar took the glass and said in a deep voice without any expression, "Continue." Ji Dong didn't say anything else. He immediately immersed himself in practicing his skills. Although the flaming bar had already made up her mind, she couldn't help but glance at Ji Dong's left hand. She could vaguely see that the wound on his finger was charred. It was obvious that Ji Dong had used his flames to burn the wound so that the blood wouldn't flow out. Looking at the fine wine in her glass, the flaming bar didn't dare to drink it for the first time. At this moment, as Ji Dong performed Scorching Sun Devour and Dark Moon Claw again, his body suddenly stiffened. A golden ray of sunlight flashed behind him, followed by a pitch-black moonlight. Ji Dong stood there and swayed. He forced himself to turn to look at the flaming bar and said, "I succeeded." After succeeding 1,000 times, the ultimate dual flames in Ji Dong's body erupted. However, the string in his heart that was stretched taut had snapped, and he fell straight to the ground. The flaming bar took a step forward and caught Ji Dong's body. She looked at him, then at the glass in her hand. An indescribable emotion flashed through her eyes. She hugged him tightly and carefully laid him flat on the ground. Behind the flaming bar, the crystal-clear red lotus fire bloomed once again. The fire elements in the air condensed into black and gold colors. They engulfed Ji Dong's body and enveloped him, nourishing his extremely exhausted body. After doing that, the flaming bar suddenly rose into the air. After taking a deep look at Ji Dong in the air, he held the glass in his hand tightly and turned into a red meteor, disappearing at the end of the lava lake. When Ji Dong woke up from his coma, he was surprised to find that he actually felt refreshed in this scorching environment. The yin-yang vortex in his chest was spinning normally, and it was clearly stronger than 9 days ago. During the 9 days of hellish cultivation, he didn't have the time to pay attention to the state of his mana. Now that he thought about it, although this extreme cultivation method could easily cause a person to collapse, it was undoubtedly more beneficial to the improvement of his abilities. He got up from the platform and looked around. There was no sign of the flaming bar. He couldn't help but shout, "Flaming bar, are you there? It's time for you to go back. Your partner has already gone to the academy to look for you. You don't have to come here often. Remember to practice the 2 newly obtained benchmark skills diligently. At the same time, remember to use the divine yin-yang lock to conceal your true abilities." The flaming bar's voice came from all directions. However, Ji Dong suddenly felt that there was something different in her voice. There was no fluctuation of emotion, it was extremely calm. Before Ji Dong could say anything else, the red light had already swept up and enveloped his body, silently disappearing into the earth's core. Bang bang bang. As soon as Ji Dong returned to his room, he heard hurried knocks on the door. "Boss, are you there?" They were already here. Ji Dong looked at his clothes that were definitely not clean and said helplessly, "I'm here." When he opened the door, he saw Kar and Bissot, who had changed into ordinary clothes, standing outside the door. Kar's clothes were still so simple, while Bissot's clothes were more luxurious. However, it was only a simple blue-fitting suit without many decorations. "Boss, what took you so long? Wow, why are you so dirty? There's even a smell all over you. Don't tell me you haven't bathed for many days." Bissot looked at Ji Dong and made a fuss. Ji Dong let the two into the room and said, "I've been cultivating for the past few days. Wait for me, I'll tidy up and we'll set off." Looking at the sky outside, it was early morning. He took a quick shower and ran to the canteen to find some food to eat. He put all the alcohol on the wine cabinet and some clothes into his storage bracelet. He was done tidying up. "Boss, you're not going to go in your school uniform, are you?" This time, even Kar couldn't help but ask. Ji Dong looked at the 3rd Fire Department uniform he was wearing and said, "What's wrong with it? You also know that I was picked up by President Yang. Besides the school uniform, what else can I wear?" Bissot smiled and said, "My dad said that people should be low-key. It's best not to let people know that we're yin and yang magician. Boss, I knew you only had the school uniform to wear, so I've already prepared it for you. 4 sets of ordinary cloth clothes, a total of 1 gold coin. Pay up." As he spoke, Bissot raised his hand and revealed a ring with a blue gem on his index finger. In a flash of blue light, 4 sets of cloth clothes had appeared in front of Ji Dong. Ji Dong was secretly moved. He knew that Bissot asked him for money because he knew his character. He didn't like to accept benefits from others. Taking the clothes, he took out a gold coin and gave it to him. "Thanks." Kar leaned against the wall and murmured, "Sure enough, women are more careful. It seems that being a sissy is also good." "Kar, if you say I'm a sissy again, I'll fight with you," Bissot said angrily. Kar smiled and said, "Yes, make an orchid gesture. You should say, I'll fight with you." "You?" Looking at the two laughing and joking, Ji Dong felt warm in his heart. It felt good to have brothers with him. He quickly changed into cloth clothes and said, "Let's go. We don't have enough time to get to our destination in 10 days. When the 3 of them walked out of the Fire Academy, they couldn't help looking back. After all, this was the place where they had lived together for 4 years. How could they not have feelings for each other? Feeling Kar and Bisu's reluctance to leave, Ji-dong put his arm around their shoulders and said, "We will come back again. At that time, we will definitely be the strongest yin and yang magician. The Fire Academy will be proud of us." After exiting Fire City, the three of them sat on a horse carriage and headed towards the northeast. Their destination wasn't just the Central Plains Empire, the largest empire in the continent. The place they were heading to was also the central point of the continent, the capital of the Central Plains Empire, the Central Plains City that was also known as the Dot of the continent. The Central Plains, bordered by the other 4 empires, had a vast land area, and the majority of the land was flat. It was definitely the strongest empire in the continent. It was rich and powerful, just like the Central Plains in the world before Ji-dong's death. However, what Ji-dong didn't understand was that according to the knowledge taught by the Fire Academy, although there were 5 empires in the continent, there were very few wars between them. This was especially so for the Central Plains, which occupied such a fertile land and was surrounded by the other 4 empires. Under normal circumstances, the borders of the Central Plains shouldn't be so peaceful. In fact, the 5 empires had always lived in harmony with each other. Chapter 30. Boss, we're almost at the border of the Southern Fire Empire. What should we do next? My dad said that it's not safe to ride a horse. Otherwise, we might have already entered the territory of the Middle-earth Empire by now. Biso complained. After 3 days in the carriage, the 3 finally arrived at the border city of the Southern Fire Empire, Starfire City. They decided to stay here for 1 night before continuing their journey. The Southern Fire Empire was located in the southernmost part of the 5 Elements continent, bordering the Western Jin Empire, Middle Earth Empire, and Eastern Wood Empire. If they were to leave Starfire City, they would need to cross the border, so they could only walk by themselves. Ji-dong was currently sitting on the bed in the inn, spreading out a map to study the specific route. Ji-dong pointed at the map for Kar and Biso to see. Look, Blazing City is located in the west of the Southern Fire Empire. We took the shortest route to reach the border, and Starfire City itself is also a border city on the west side of the Southern Fire Empire. From here, we have 2 choices. One is to go east, go around the Frost Mountain Range that crosses the Western Jin Empire, Middle Earth Empire, and Southern Fire Empire, pass through Bingrong City in the center of the Southern Fire Empire's border, enter the Middle Earth Empire, and continue north until we reach the Central Plains City. This route is easier, it's all official roads, but we'll have to walk at least 500 li. The Frost Mountain Range is the second largest mountain range in the continent, spanning nearly 1,000 li. If we want to go around it and reach the Central Plains City within 7 days, time will be very tight. The other route is to go northeast from Starfire City, directly through the Frost Mountain Range, and enter the Middle Earth Empire. Although the Frost Mountain Range is very long, it's only less than 100 li in length. In this case, we should be able to save a lot of time, but the road will be much harder. If we encounter magic beasts, we'll be in danger. Which route do you think is better? Kar said without hesitation, let's go straight through the Frost Mountain Range. This way we can save at least 2 days. Also, when teacher Xia Tian taught us the geography of the continent, didn't he say that the Frost Mountain Range is an area with very few magic beasts? Even if there are, they're only low-level magic beasts. We should be able to deal with them. Before condensing the yin-yang crown, teacher Xia Tian taught me some basic skills. Although they're not very powerful, they're enough to support me. Biso snorted. Do you think you're the only one who knows? Teacher Qiu Tian also taught me. Although Xia Tian also had plans to teach Ji-dong, neither he nor Qiu Tian knew how Ji-dong would teach. After all, neither of them had ever seen a demon master with both yin and yang attribute. Yang Bingtian directly rejected their plans to teach Ji-dong magic skills, and told them that the Heavenly STEM Academy was the most suitable place for Ji-dong to learn. Magic skills couldn't be practiced casually. If one practiced a magic skill that wasn't suitable for oneself, it would be harmful to one's own cultivation. Hearing this, Ji Dong was instantly relieved. I also know a few basic skills. Then it's decided. Tomorrow morning, we'll buy some necessary supplies and set off to cross the Frost Mountain range. It's getting late, you guys go back to your rooms and rest. Ji Dong also had his own plans. Just like what Carr said, the probability of magic beasts appearing in the Frost Mountain range was very low. Moreover, they were all yin and yang magicians, so this could reduce the time spent on the road. Moreover, he had been in a daze for the past few days, so he didn't think too much about it. The three of them got 2 rooms in the hotel. Ji Dong used the excuse that he wasn't used to staying with others as an excuse, so he stayed alone in one room, while Carr and Bissot shared a room. Of course, he did this so that he could mix drinks for the flaming bar. Although he had been on the road for the past 3 days, he hadn't stopped this job that he had been working on for 4 years. Carr and Bissot went back to their rooms to rest. Ji Dong immediately took out his bartending equipment from his storage bracelet, and after carefully making a cocktail, he called out the name of the flaming bar. The geocentric lake was still as hot as ever. Ever since the flaming bar created that platform in the magma, every time Ji Dong initiated a teleportation, he would appear directly in the center of the platform. A red light flashed and Ji Dong's feet landed on the ground. However, he wasn't in the mood to feel the rich fire elements around him. His eyes quickly looked around, but he couldn't find any trace of the flaming bar. "Flaming bar, are you there?" He shouted loudly, but he didn't get any response. It had been 3 days. Ever since he woke up from his coma, he hadn't seen the flaming bar again. These few days, he would be teleported back to the surface after the drinks were delivered. The flaming bar never appeared, not even a sound could be heard. However, Ji Dong could feel her presence. If she wasn't there, how could he complete the teleportation process? But why isn't the flaming bar seeing me? Although he came with hope, Ji Dong's heart was filled with disappointment once again. The wine glass in his hand flew away on its own, heading towards the depths of the geocentric lake. Meanwhile, the light of the red lotus had enveloped his body, teleporting him back to the hotel room. It wasn't until Ji Dong's figure completely disappeared that the perfect figure of the flaming bar slowly appeared on the huge rock. She was holding a glass of wine, tasting the wine in the glass in a lonely manner. Her expression was surprisingly similar to Ji Dong's. Her bright eyes were shining with a dazed light, as if she was thinking about something. Shaking her head gently, the flaming bar mumbled to herself, "Don't think too much about it. He's just a human after all. Whether it's family or friendship, if I spend too much time with him, I won't be able to bear this unbearable feeling. If he dies in the human world, won't I have to go through that extreme pain again? It's better to not see him. It's a good thing for him and me. Ji Dong, I'm sorry. You'll eventually forget about me. I hope you can become stronger and stronger in your cultivation." Returning to the hotel room, even though Ji Dong was a little tired from the 3 days of travel, he couldn't fall asleep for a long time. As soon as he closed his eyes, the beautiful face of the flaming bar would appear in his mind. He would rather the flaming bar scold him severely than not being able to see her or hear her voice. These few days, it was as if he had lost his soul. He had been working hard on his cultivation for the past 4 years, but now he seemed to have lost interest. The next morning, Ji Dong and the other 2 bought a large amount of food and water in Meteor Trail City. They placed them in Ji Dong and Bissou's storage bracelets and storage rings. With these 2 treasures, their journey would be much easier. Once they left Meteor Trail City, the 3 of them immediately started running. After determining their direction, they headed straight towards the northeast. In fact, they didn't need to look too closely. Meteor Trail City was only 100 miles away from the Frost Mountain range. From afar, they could already see the seemingly endless mountains that looked like a sleeping dragon. With the solid foundation laid in the Fire Academy, the three of them ran for 100 miles in one breath. They only took a break when they reached the foot of the Frost Mountain range. After eating something, they began to climb the mountain. This was the Frost Mountain range, but from their current position, they couldn't feel the wind at all, let alone see any frost or snow. After all, the Southern Fire Empire was located in the southernmost part of the continent, so the temperature was relatively high. As for how this mountain range got its name, Ji-dong and the others didn't know. No matter what type of magic power it was, after cultivating it, it would cleanse the body of impurities and strengthen the body. The three of them were yin and yang magicians who had condensed the yin-yang crown. A short distance was nothing to them. After crossing the first few mountains, they quickly entered the hinterland of the Frost Mountain range. The sun gradually rose from the east and hung in the middle of the sky. Ji-dong wiped the sweat on his forehead with his sleeve and said, "Let's take a break and eat something." After rushing for the whole morning, they had also crossed 3 mountains that were less than 1,000 meters high. Based on their current speed, they would definitely be able to pass through the Frost Mountain range in 2 days. When they reached the borders of the Middle-earth Empire, they could easily hire a carriage and use the next 5 days to reach the Central Plains city. The three of them found a relatively flat place and sat together. Ji-dong took out some cured meat and bread from his storage bracelet and took out 3 water bags. He threw one each to Bis-so and one to Kar. Fire element magicians did have an innate advantage living in the wild. Their flames could not only light up the place and keep warm, but they also didn't have to worry about eating cold food. Ji-dong first picked up a piece of cured meat and ignited a red third flame in his right hand. He roasted it under the ground. After a while, the fragrance of the cured meat had already spread. He then roasted another piece of bread, and the fragrance immediately assailed their nostrils. Kar also sat and did the same thing as Ji-dong. Only Bis-so looked left and right. He had no choice. His fourth flame was definitely stronger than third flame in terms of corrosiveness and continuous attack. However, if he used that extremely strong flame to roast meat, the meat would be inedible. It would not be extinguished until it was completely burned. Looking at Bis-so's pitiful look, Ji-dong smiled and handed over the food he had roasted. He said, "Here, you eat first. I'll roast another." Bis-so was overjoyed. He took it without hesitation and ate heartily. Kar smiled. It was a bit strange for this big guy to have a flattering smile. However, the smile on his face could only be described as flattering. He said, "Boss, should we get some wine to refresh ourselves?" Ji-dong said in a bad mood, "You are not allowed to drink at noon. If you drink, it will not refresh you, but sleep. We will definitely be sleeping in the mountains tonight. At that time, I will definitely give you some wine to drive away the cold." Just as Ji-dong started to roast another portion of dry food, suddenly, a faint fishy smell drifted over. Ji-dong's 6 senses were extremely sensitive. He immediately woke up and stood up. He said, "Be careful, there might be a situation." Kar and Bis-so quickly stood up and came to Ji-dong's side. Bis-so even had a piece of bread in his mouth. He opened his eyes wide and said vaguely, "Could it be a magical beast? I can't be that unlucky, right?" Ji-dong's gaze instantly sharpened. Staring in a certain direction, he slowly raised his right hand and suddenly clenched it into a fist. With a poof, a red flame filled with a wild aura instantly soared. With a whoosh, a green silhouette jumped out from the nearby shrubbery. When the three of them saw it, they immediately smiled. That's right, it was a magical beast. However, it was only a meter long, and its green fur was extremely shiny. Surprisingly, it was a small wolf. There were obvious magical fluctuations coming from its body, and it bared its fangs at Ji-dong and the other two as it whimpered. It was no wonder that Ji-dong and the other two would laugh. Although they didn't know much about magical beasts in their team, the magical beast in front of them was clearly a beginner-level wood-type magical beast, the greenwood wolf. The magical beasts on the 5 elements continent were divided into 10 ranks. If they were to be compared in terms of strength, then it would be like the 10 titles of the yin and yang magician. The first rank was a beginner-level magical beast, the second and third ranks were mid-level magical beasts, the 4th to 6th ranks were high-level magical beasts, and the 7th to 9th ranks were super magical beasts, also known as emperor-level magical beasts. The 10th rank was a legendary existence, also known as a divine beast. It was as rare as the 9 crowns of the yin and yang magician. Generally speaking, wolf-type magical beasts lived in the wastelands or forests. Only the greenwood wolf in front of them would live in the mountain forest. The greenwood wolf itself was only a mid-level magical beast, while the little fellow in front of them was clearly a beginner-level magical beast. It was like a demon master that had yet to condense a yin-yang crown. In addition, Ji-dong and the other 2 were all fire-type demon masters. Of the 5 elements, fire was the first to subdue metal, and the second to subdue wood. It was 3 against 1, so it was no wonder that the 3 of them would laugh in such a relaxed manner. "Let me." Bissot jumped out and walked over to the little greenwood wolf with a grin. Handing over the fragrant roasted bacon, he said, "Do you want to eat it? You must have smelled it." The little greenwood wolf clearly didn't understand what he was saying. Looking at the bacon, its nose twitched and it moved closer, opening its mouth to take a bite. Bissot stuffed the bacon into his mouth, and as he chewed, he began to laugh heartily. "Even if you wanted to eat it, I wouldn't let you eat it. Who asked you to scare us? Ha ha, this little wolf is really interesting. Its fur hasn't even grown out yet, and it's already running out to steal food. Hurry up and leave. Big brother is kind, so I won't kill you." As he spoke, Bissot waved his hands, and 2 blue flames rose a meter high. As he waved them, the little greenwood wolf let out an aggrieved whimper, turned around and dove back into the bushes. Bissot turned around and laughed. "Done. A little fellow like this actually dares to go out and rob others. It really doesn't have any self-awareness." Just as he said this, Bissot suddenly froze. This was because he realized that the smiles on Ji-dong and Car's faces had suddenly frozen. "Hurry up and come over!" Ji-dong roared. He was the first to react, and he charged forward. Bissot subconsciously looked back, and saw that from within the bushes, a 3-meter-long, 1.8-meter-tall wolf had emerged. Beside it, the little greenwood wolf from before was howling angrily at Bissot. Chapter 31. What was the meaning of extreme joy turning to sorrow? This was exactly what was happening to Bissot. Bullying the young had attracted the old. Even if he used his toes to think, he could tell that the greenwood wolf behind him was definitely an adult. He was so frightened that he hurriedly leapt forward, madly sprinting towards Ji-dong and Car. Bissot had only caught a glimpse of it, but Ji-dong and Car had clearly seen it. That huge wolf was not as simple as an adult greenwood wolf. There were 3 golden stripes on its forehead, clearly indicating that it was a greenwood wolf king. Young greenwood wolves were primary-level magical beasts, while ordinary adult greenwood wolves were second-level magical beasts. They were equivalent to scholar-level magical masters like Ji-dong, who had condensed a yin-yang crown. As for the greenwood wolf king, as the strongest greenwood wolf, it was a third-level magical beast, which was equivalent to a magical master with 2 crowns. Furthermore, this only referred to the magical energy it possessed, and did not include the strength of its physical body. Facing this 3-meter-long greenwood wolf king, Ji-dong felt that the situation was not the slightest bit inferior to the situation he had faced when he had faced Lu Jun. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that their fire element was able to restrain the wood element. Furthermore, after 9 days of hellish training, Ji-dong had also become quite different from before. Furthermore, he also had the help of his 2 companions. The greenwood wolf king let out a low howl and suddenly rushed out, pouncing towards Bissot. Its huge body brought with it a strong, fishy wind, and it caught up to Bissot in midair. Its right front claw glinted with a cold light as it slashed towards Bissot's back. Ji Dong's reaction was definitely the fastest. As soon as he saw the huge green wood wolf king emerge from the shrubbery, he had already charged forward. As he ran, red and blue flames burst forth, and a strange black and white yin-yang crown condensed above his head. Although he had concealed his ultimate dual flames, he did not hide his magical energy at all. Level 13 magical energy was completely unleashed. Just as Ji Dong's body was about to collide with Bisso, suddenly, Bisso and Car's vision blurred. Ji Dong's body seemed to become illusory, and a faint afterimage appeared behind him. Stealthily crouching, he was already behind Bisso. From Car's point of view, it looked as if Ji Dong had directly passed through Bissu's body. By the time Ji Dong's body had flashed past Bisso, the Greenwood Wolf King had already arrived in the air above Bisso, its claws already slashing downwards. The dual-colored flames instantly turned red, simultaneously sinking into Ji Dong's body. His right fist also instantly turned fiery red, and the scorching sun devour technique exploded forth. Instead of charging forward, it smashed upwards, smashing towards the Greenwood Wolf King's right forearm. Ji Dong's previous movement was simply too fast. Not only had Bisso and Car not seen it clearly, even the Greenwood Wolf King had not been able to see it clearly. 9 days of hell, the scorching sun devour technique that had been painstakingly trained 1,000 times had finally exploded forth with its true power. With a loud bang, Ji Dong's right fist landed squarely on its target, and a blinding red third flame exploded forth, instantly engulfing the Greenwood Wolf King's right forearm. The Greenwood Wolf King's entire body was actually forced to pause in midair by Ji Dong's attack. As soon as he entered into battle mode, Ji Dong seemed to have transformed into a completely different person. The techniques he had painstakingly trained in this moment were completely unleashed. His right foot stepped forward, and his left hand, covered in a blue third flame, transformed into a claw that slammed into the Greenwood Wolf King's left forearm. When the blue third flame collided with the scorching sun devour red third flame, another violent explosion sounded out. The red and blue third flame mixed together, forming a small flaming tornado that actually forcefully smashed the Greenwood Wolf King's body into the air. At this time, Bisso had already regrouped with Car, who had rushed up just in time to witness this shocking scene. Almost simultaneously, they cried out in shock. A single-person combination technique. However, Ji Dong's movements were not yet complete. The Greenwood Wolf King's upper body was smashed into the air, instantly revealing an opening. Ji Dong's entire body shot forward like a cannonball, not aiming for the Greenwood Wolf King's exposed abdomen. Instead, he thrust his right shoulder forward, heavily smashing into the Greenwood Wolf King's right forearm, which had been charred black by the scorching sun devour and dark moon claw. The blinding red third flame exploded out once more, and another violent explosion sounded out. The Greenwood Wolf King howled in pain, and its 3-meter-long body was sent flying backwards. The red and blue third flame tornado also appeared, spreading from its right forearm all the way to its right shoulder. The area that had been struck was already charred black. Consecutive combination techniques? Car and Bisso, who had originally been preparing to rush up to help, were completely dumbfounded by this scene. Although they had studied at the Fire Academy for 4 years, they did not have any actual combat experience, and they had only recently learned a few of the basic magic skills. Seeing Ji Dong's smooth movements, as well as his terrifying explosive attack power, the two of them really thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. Ji Dong panted as he retreated, while the Greenwood Wolf King rolled on the ground, retreating 5 or 6 meters. It let out another mournful howl, and its right foreleg was completely lifted up, not daring to land on the ground. Obviously, it had suffered a heavy injury. After all, Ji Dong was someone who had lived 2 lives. Although he did not have much combat experience, he was very clear on the principle that injuring an enemy's entire body was not as good as injuring a single part of an enemy's body. This Greenwood Wolf King's true combat strength was probably not inferior to Lu Jun's by much. It was just that its attributes were countered by his own flames. The only thing it was inferior to Lu Jun in was its intelligence. It looked like Ji Dong had forced the Greenwood Wolf King back in a single exchange, but in that instant, he had not only used his full strength, but had also consecutively used 4 basic skills to achieve such an effect. Apart from Scorching Sun Devour and Dark Moon Claw, the movement he had used to move past Bissau was also a magic skill. It was inherited from the Dark Flame Devil King's basic skill, Dark Moon Dance. It was a close-range movement technique, and the last move he had used was a continuation of the Scorching Sun Devour, Scorching Sun Blast. First, he had used the Dark Moon Dance to confuse the Greenwood Wolf King, and then used the other 3 major offensive magic skills in the order of Third Fire, Fourth Fire, and Third Fire to explode with the effects of 2 combined skills. Even if the Greenwood Wolf King's body far surpassed that of a human's, it would not be able to withstand such concentrated attacks. At least for a short period of time, its front right leg would definitely be crippled. A Greenwood Wolf King without a leg would undoubtedly be much easier to deal with. Of course, if Ji Dong had used his ultimate dual flames, the effects would have been even more terrifying. However, the ultimate dual flames also had a major weakness for the current Ji Dong, and that was that it consumed too much mana. The terrifying fire attribute required a large amount of mana as a backup. Simply put, if he had used the ordinary Third Fire to cast Scorching Sun Devour, Ji Dong could cast it more than 15 times without running out of mana. But if he used the Third Yang Sacred Flame, he would need to rest to recover his mana after using it 5 times. Under the situation where he used his ultimate dual flames, he could only use these 4 basic skills once. Thus, in a situation where he had the help of his companions, choosing not to use the ultimate dual flames was also a wise choice. Of course, Ji Dong also knew that the reason he was able to defeat the Greenwood Wolf King head-on was also because of the element of surprise. Although the Dance of the Dark Moon did not have any offensive capabilities, it was similar to the time when he had broken Lu Jun's shield. Under the sudden eruption, the Greenwood Wolf King had been caught unprepared. Bissau and Carr arrived at Ji Dong's side, their eyes filled with shock. Only now did they realize that Ji Dong, who possessed the yin-yang twin flames, actually possessed such a powerful battle prowess. However, now was clearly not the time to ask questions. The 3 of them simultaneously raised their mana to the maximum, with Ji Dong as the spearhead, forming a triangular formation to face the Greenwood Wolf King. A layer of gentle green light was released from the Greenwood Wolf King's body, spreading out across the ground. At the same time, its right forearm was also covered in a green light. It glared fiercely at Ji Dong and the others, but did not attack again. Its charred right foreleg was still twitching uncontrollably. Carr said in a low voice, "It's healing. Wood-type and water-type demonic techniques both have healing abilities. Boss, what should we do?" Ji Dong's heart suddenly jumped and he shouted, "Careful, it's releasing its flames." Just as he finished speaking, thick vines suddenly burst out of the ground, shooting towards the 3 of them. Obviously, the Greenwood Wolf King had used its own demonic technique to release, intending to use it to suppress the 3 of them. As Ji Dong shouted this warning, he had already half-knelt on the ground. A fist filled with Third Fire suddenly slammed into the ground, and the vines that were shooting towards him were instantly smashed into pieces. Carr's reaction wasn't slow either. Dazzling red flames burst out from his body, and at the same time, he spread out his arms, his entire body spinning on the spot. Although he wasn't able to concentrate his demonic technique to shatter the vines like Ji Dong, he was still able to send a large number of vines flying, unable to wrap around his body. At this time, the difference between Third Fire and Fourth Fire was obvious. Third Fire was explosive, while Fourth Fire was continuous. Although Bissau had also reacted at the first instant, his body was still wrapped up by the vines. The blue fourth fire instantly spread across the vines, corroding and burning them, but it was unable to immediately break free from the entanglement. Car shook off the vines that were attacking him, then grabbed hold of the vines that were burning with blue flames on Bisu's body. When the fourth fire and third fire touched each other, they instantly exploded, forcibly breaking apart the vines that were wrapping around Bisu's body. This was an innate advantage in terms of attribute. If the three of them hadn't been facing a Greenwood Wolf King, but a water or earth magical beast that had a natural suppressive effect on fire attribute magical techniques, they definitely wouldn't have been able to deal with it so easily. Ji-dong's figure flickered as he once again charged at the Greenwood Wolf King. It was 1 against 3, and the Greenwood Wolf King needed a large amount of magical energy to heal. It would be extremely difficult for it to use a magical technique to deal any damage to these 3 fire attribute scholar magical masters, so he wasn't worried that Kar and Bisso would be injured. Furthermore, the Greenwood Wolf King had lost one of its 4 limbs, so its movements couldn't change. He definitely couldn't allow it to heal its right front leg, otherwise it would be even more difficult to deal with. Seeing that Ji-dong was charging at it again, the Greenwood Wolf King seemed a bit flustered. It bared its fangs and let out a low growl. Its body shook, and the green fur on its body stood on end. Dozens of them shot out, piercing towards Ji-dong. Having lost the ability to move its right front leg, it could be said that its physical strength had been greatly reduced. Using a magical technique to attack was obviously the best choice. The streaks of green fur transformed into greenwood spikes in the air, flying towards Ji-dong. This magical technique was the Greenwood Wolf King's most proficient area of effect attack. Ji-dong now had 4 magical techniques, but these 4 magical techniques had a problem. They could only be used in close combat, and not at long range. This wasn't because the magical techniques of the 2 sovereigns had any drawbacks, but because his current magical energy was too low. Those magical techniques that could be used externally required even more magical energy, and were obviously not something that he could currently possess. At the very least, he would have to wait until he had won 2 championships before he would be able to train in them. Thus, this kind of area of effect mid-range attack magical techniques could be said to be a counter to him. However, Ji-dong's training in Hell's 9 days in the Earth's core lake had not been in vain, and the flaming bar would not do anything pointless. Compared to the powerful scorching sun blast, the flaming bar hoped that Ji-dong would have the second magical technique from the Dark Flame Devil King, Dark Moon Dance. The blue fourth fire instantly enveloped his entire body. Under the effect of the Dark Moon Dance, Ji-dong felt that his will had become even more acute under the stimulation of the 4th fire spikes. He could clearly grasp the direction in which each greenwood spike was flying. Although this was because the Greenwood Wolf King was still a mid-level magical beast, and its attack power was limited, for Ji-dong to be able to do this with only his strength of the 13th level, it was already very difficult. The blue 4th fire retracted about 3 inches from the surface of Ji-dong's body. Just as his body was about to charge into the greenwood spikes, suddenly, his entire body began to flash rapidly within an extremely small area. Due to his extremely fast speed, an illusory afterimage appeared behind him. Instantly, most of the greenwood spikes missed. A few landed on his body, but they were deflected by the strange 4th fire that had gathered around his body. The entire process was completed in the blink of an eye. From the Greenwood Wolf King's point of view, it looked as if Ji-dong had forcibly passed through the greenwood spikes it had released. In a flash, he had appeared right in front of it. If Ji-dong had used the Dark Moon Dance with the Ding-Si Netherworld Spirit Flame, then those greenwood spikes that were not very eye-catching would have been turned to ash. Even if he had used the 4th fire, it would not have caused any harm to Ji-dong. At this time, because of Ji-dong's sudden advance, the Greenwood Wolf King did not have the time to attack Kar and Bisso, who were behind it. The 2 of them did not remain idle either. Exchanging a glance, they simultaneously turned their bodies, facing each other. Raising their right hands, they formed a semicircle in the air, then simultaneously pushed forward. One red, one blue, the two different types of flames abruptly merged together in the air, forming a red and blue fireball that flew out with a loud rumble, smashing directly towards the Greenwood Wolf King. After unleashing this attack, Car and Bissu's faces both paled. Chapter 32. The speed at which the fireball shot out was definitely much faster than the speed at which Ji-dong was charging forward. Practically by the time Ji-dong was only 2 meters away from the Greenwood Wolf King, the two-colored fireball had already arrived in front of the Greenwood Wolf King. Helpless, the Greenwood Wolf King let out a loud howl, and a ball of green light shot out from its mouth, transforming into a greenwood shield in front of it. Boom. A violent explosion sounded out, and the greenwood shield in front of the Greenwood Wolf King was shattered. However, the energy of the two-colored fireball had also been exhausted. Green, blue, and red, 3 rays of light instantly exploded forth, and the violent mana fluctuations caused Ji-dong's body to involuntarily slow down for a moment. It had to be known that although Car and Bissu both had a single attribute, they were still two people. Their individual mana was not comparable to Ji-dong's, but when the two of them combined, they were much stronger than Ji-dong's. Otherwise, the two of them would not be able to use this kind of combination to unleash a magic skill. As for the Greenwood Wolf King, it had already expended a lot of its mana, and it still had to heal itself. The Greenwood shield itself was not in its perfect state, and was instantly broken by this powerful frontal magic skill. How could Ji-dong let go of such an opportunity? The scorching sun devourer appeared once again, and a powerful punch instantly absorbed all the flames on his body. The yin-yang crown on his head also instantly turned completely white. This was what the flaming bar had taught him. When using an elemental magic skill, he had to completely convert the mana in his body through the yin-yang vortex into that elemental magic skill in order to unleash the greatest attack power. If it was the Bingwu primordial yang sacred fire, with Ji-dong's current strength, he would not be able to completely control it. However, if it was only the Bingwu primordial yang sacred fire, there would not be any problems. The divine yin-yang lock technique was already extremely effective in controlling mana, and with the addition of the Flame Tyrant King's magic skill, it was also extremely beneficial for controlling mana. The Greenwood Wolf King did something that surprised Ji-dong. This time, it didn't raise its claws in response. Instead, it lowered its head and used its head, which had 3 golden patterns on it, to knock Hyoheim. If the Greenwood Wolf King didn't use its claws to block, Ji-dong could understand. After all, one of its claws was heavily injured, and if it used its other claw to block his attack, it wouldn't be able to support its body. But if it used its head to block, Ji-dong found it a bit strange. However, when his scorching sun devourer landed on the Greenwood Wolf King's head, he immediately understood. Boom! Amidst the loud explosion, Ji-dong was the one who was sent flying this time. He felt as if his right fist had struck a hard piece of granite. His fingers were in so much pain that they felt like they were going to split apart. The powerful counterforce also sent him flying. Copperhead, iron bones, tofu waste. That's right, the hardest part of a wolf was its head. This was also the reason why the Greenwood Wolf King had used its head to block Ji-dong's demonic skill. However, the Greenwood Wolf King had also underestimated the power of the scorching sun devourer. After being struck by Ji-dong's fist, it didn't feel any better. The scorching sun devourer was a skill that gathered all the fire attribute demonic energy from every part of its body into its right fist and compressed it before releasing it. Although Ji-dong's current demonic energy wasn't enough to release this demonic skill, the explosive power and heat generated by the scorching sun devourer was extremely shocking. In addition to the fact that the Greenwood Wolf King's demonic energy was also temporarily depleted, although Ji-dong's fist didn't cause any damage to it, the explosive fire attribute demonic energy still exploded forth. A scorched black fist mark was left on the greenwood wolf king's forehead. It opened its mouth and spat out a large amount of hot air from its nose and mouth. Woo! The greenwood wolf king let out a low howl, and its 3 legs suddenly leapt forward. It jumped to the side of the small greenwood wolf king and grabbed it with its mouth. Turning around, it dove back into the shrubbery. Car and Bissot charged forward, wanting to chase after it. However, they were stopped by Ji Dong, who was grimacing from the pain of his fist. Don't chase after it. Don't chase a cornered enemy, and don't enter a forest. This is its territory. Furthermore, this greenwood wolf king might have some sort of desperate technique. If we really provoke it, we won't be able to do anything good. Bissot said somewhat dispiritedly, it looks like our strength is still far too lacking. Just a single Class 3 magical beast was enough to cause us to be covered in dirt. If it weren't for Boss's timely response, I'm afraid we would have suffered greatly. Glaring at Bissot, Carr said, Who told you to tease that small wolf for no reason? If you bullied the small, how could the old not come out? Bissot innocently said, How can you blame me? This greenwood wolf king is truly crafty. Even if it can't beat it, it can still run away. If we killed it, we might even be able to obtain a wood element crystal core. Ji Dong said with some shock, Crystal core? Is it a crystal crown? Bissot said, Of course not. Because we don't have any battle strength, the Academy hasn't taught us anything about it. I've only heard from my father that if we hunt magical beasts, we have a chance to obtain their crystal core. The crystal core will have the same attribute as the magical beast. I don't know what the crystal crown is, but the crystal core is a good item. Whatever attribute the crystal core is, it will be able to replenish the magical energy of the user. To be more accurate, if I can obtain a Class 2 magical beast's crystal core, then I will have double the amount of magical energy I have. Although the strength of my magical techniques won't change, my endurance in battle will increase by a lot. However, it will need to be a Class 4 fire crystal core. You guys need a Class 3 fire crystal core. Ji Dong suddenly said, Then that's equivalent to replenishing magical energy. If we have such a crystal core, then wouldn't we not need to worry about running out of magical energy? Bissot shook his head. That's not it. The magical energy within a crystal core is limited. For example, the crystal cores of magical beasts of the 3rd rank and below are all single-use items. Once the magical energy within is completely absorbed, it will become useless. There is no way to replenish it. Only the crystal cores of high-level magical beasts of the 4th to 4th rank can be replenished by a magician. Furthermore, they can even replenish some of their magical energy with the passage of time. The speed of recovery depends on the attributes of the crystal core. However, those things are all ridiculously expensive. Don't even think about it. Even if it was a Class 4 magical beast, Teacher Xia Tian would have difficulty dealing with it. The difference between a Class 3 magical beast and a Class 4 magical beast is like the difference between a triple crown magician and a quadruple crown magician. The difference is like the difference between heaven and earth. Speaking of which, for us to be able to chase away a Class 3 magical beast was already not easy. Carr wrapped his arm around Ji Dong's shoulder. Boss, tell me honestly, who did you learn those magical skills from? Originally, Bissot and I wanted to give you a surprise, but we didn't expect you to give us a big surprise first. That was a single-person combination skill, and also a continuous combination skill. If it wasn't for that combination skill of yours that heavily injured the Greenwood Wolf King's right front leg, perhaps we would have been finished today. Bissot said, That's right. These past 2 months I've been training together with Carr. After training for a full 2 months, I finally mastered that fireball CDD. Combination skills are too difficult to coordinate. We had originally planned to go to the Heavenly STEM Academy and amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, but who would have thought that you, boss, would be even stronger and be able to complete a combination skill by yourself. Bissot wasn't wrong. Although a combination skill was much stronger than an ordinary magical skill, it required at least 2 magicians to be able to use it, so it wasn't that easy to succeed. It required 2 people to be extremely well coordinated. After all, everyone's method of releasing their magical power was different. Without going through a lot of practice, it was very difficult to coordinate perfectly. Ji Dong chuckled and said, "Would you believe me if I said I was self-taught? If you like it, I'll teach it to you." Carr shook his head and said, "There's no need, boss. That magical skill of yours is clearly only suitable for you. It requires the coordination of 2 attributes. If we learn it, it would be nondescript. It's better to practice our own magical skills." Teacher Xia Tian said that only the most suitable magical skill is the best. "But, the combination skill we used just now, boss, you can try it. You have 2 attributes, so maybe you'll be able to master it immediately. Another long-range attack skill isn't bad either." Teacher Xia Tian said that if we practice this fireball CDD well, it can be considered a hit skill. Although it's a low-level hit skill, it's already rare for us magicians of the scholar level. Thinking of the fireball CDD that suddenly broke the azurewood shield, Ji Dong couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. If he could have a long-range attack skill, his strength would definitely increase. He naturally wouldn't be polite with Carr and Bissot, so he immediately asked for their advice. The fireball CDD was not complicated. After all, it was composed of 2 basic skills. When Ji Dong started practicing it, he found that these 2 basic skills were very simple. They were much easier than Devour Sun and Claw of the Dark Moon. They both condensed mana before launching an attack, but this fireball CDD only directly extracted mana from the yin or yang corona. Through the movement of drawing a semicircle, the mana was gathered through the arm to the palm and condensed into a ball before launching. After the 2 fireballs were gathered together, a burst of mana was mobilized to boost the whole process. Compared to Devour Sun and Claw of the Dark Moon, which needed to instantly gather mana from every part of the body and had countless techniques to release, this fireball CDD was much weaker. Standing under the tree, Ji Dong simultaneously drew a semicircle on each side of his body, and finally condensed them in front of his chest. The clearly visible fireball CDD condensed into a ball in his palms. His left hand was fireball CDD, and his right hand was fireball CDD. He pushed it out at the same time, and the 2 balls of light condensed in the air, turning into a fireball a size smaller than the one Bissot and Carr had used before. It crashed into a small tree not far away with a loud bang, and suddenly burst into a rain of fire. The small tree broke in the middle, and flames shot out in all directions. Carr and Bissot stared dumbfoundedly at Ji Dong, who had used this skill for the first time. The 2 looked at each other, speechless. Ji Dong turned his head to look at the 2 and said, "Did I use it correctly just now? Is there anything wrong?" Bissot patted Ji Dong on the shoulder and said, "Boss, I'm stimulated." After saying that, he made a long sigh with a face full of unwillingness. Carr smiled bitterly and said, "Boss, Bissot and I practiced this magic skill for a whole month before we could barely use it. We practiced for another month before we could ensure that we wouldn't fail and blow ourselves up every time we used it. We've been burned countless times, and you succeeded easily on your first try. I'm also stimulated." Ji Dong laughed and said, "This may be a little advantage of dual attributes. However, in terms of power, it's much worse than when you use it. I'm using dual attributes alone, so there's naturally no problem with cooperation. The way I mobilize my own magic will never be different, so it's easier to use a combination skill." Although the power of his fireball wasn't as great as the combined power of Carr and Bissot, don't forget, he was only one person. With the foundation of the Devour Sun and the Dark Moon Claw, using this fireball was naturally a piece of cake. Although this long-range magic skill was not bad, it consumed a lot of magic power. Just this one move, Ji Dong had used up a third of his magic power. If he had used his dual flames, perhaps he would only be able to use it once. From this magic skill, it could be seen that Ji Dong was even more determined to work hard on his two sovereign skills. This fireball could only be used as a supplement to his strength. The appearance of the Greenwood Wolf King caused the three of them to be on guard. They didn't dare to stay any longer and continued on their way, heading deeper into the Frost Mountain range. Even if there weren't any powerful magical beasts here, there was still danger. If another adult Greenwood wolf had come today, it wouldn't be easy for them to escape unscathed. However, their judgment was clearly correct. In this part of the Frost Mountain range, there were indeed very few magical beasts. Especially after they passed a few more short mountain peaks, not to mention magical beasts, even ordinary wild beasts were rarely seen. The sky gradually darkened, and the sun quietly set over the distant mountains, taking away the brightness of the day. As Ji Dong looked at the map, he pointed ahead and said, "Look, that mountain over there is the highest peak of the Frost Mountain range. Tomorrow, as long as we climb over there, there won't be much left. We should be able to walk out of the mountain range before nightfall tomorrow." The mountain that Ji Dong pointed to was at least 3,000 meters tall. With the light of the setting sun, they could faintly see that the top of the mountain was covered in snow. To be able to see such a scene in the southern part of the continent was extremely rare. However, only the top of the mountain was white. Looking at the setting sun and the snowy peak, and breathing in the refreshing air of the mountain forest, Ji Dong's mood that had been depressed for the past few days couldn't help but improve a bit. He thought to himself, "Flaming Bar, I hope I'll be able to see you tonight." Bissot sat down on the ground and leaned against a large tree, saying, "Boss, I don't want to move anymore, I'm dead tired." Car's situation was much better than Bissot's. Hyoheim asked, "Boss, do we still need to light a fire?" Ji Dong thought for a moment, then said, "Yes, not only do we need to light a fire, but we also need to make a big bonfire. Wild beasts are naturally afraid of fire. Even if there are magical beasts in this mountain range, they are only of the wood or earth attribute. With a big bonfire, it will also have a deterrent effect on low-level magical beasts. After eating, you guys rest first. I'll keep watch, and you guys take turns in the middle of the night. We still need to be careful in the mountains, after all, encountering a magical beast is no laughing matter." Chapter 33. Ji Dong didn't get what he wanted. After dinner, before Carr and Bissot went to bed, he went back to the geocentric lake with the excuse of detoxification. However, he still didn't see the flaming bar. He had no choice but to make a cocktail and return quickly. His good mood from the evening was gone. Carr and Bissot went to sleep in the tent, but Ji Dong couldn't sleep for a long time. Looking at the burning bonfire in front of him, the image of the flaming bar kept flashing before his eyes. A strong longing gnawed at his heart. He hadn't seen the flaming bar for a few days, and he realized how important the flaming bar was to him. It couldn't be described with words. Perhaps it was the bonfire, but the night passed peacefully. Bissot and Carr got up one after another to keep watch. They didn't encounter any wild beasts, let alone magical beasts, even when the sky was bright. After a simple meal, Ji Dong and the other two cultivated for an hour to adjust themselves to their peak condition. Then, they set off again. It might be easy for ordinary people to get tired sleeping in the wild, but the three of them were magicians, and they were at the age where they were full of energy. Even Bissot, who was complaining about being tired the night before, was full of energy when he woke up in the morning. They continued to move forward. After crossing a ravine, the three of them entered the range of the highest peak of the Frost Mountain range. Although there were no roads on the mountain, the plants were enough to help them climb smoothly. Soon, they were halfway up the mountain. However, their speed slowed down significantly. The higher they went, the steeper the mountain became. To avoid unnecessary danger, Ji Dong took out a rope from his storage bracelet and tied him, Carr, and Bissot together. They really became grasshoppers on a rope. Ji Dong's actions were very reasonable. They were all magicians, and their bodies were much stronger than ordinary people's. If anyone lost their footing, the strength of the other two would definitely be able to pull them back. With the existence of the rope, their safety would naturally be greatly increased. Finally, when the fiery red sun gradually rose to the middle of the sky, the three of them also entered the area covered by the snow and ice of the main peak. The temperature had obviously dropped a lot, and the occasional mountain breeze would immediately bring a bone-chilling feeling. Carr and Bissot had been living in the southern Fire Empire for a long time, so they weren't used to the cold. Ji-dong had lived 2 lives. He asked them to put on their coats and use their own fire magic to warm themselves, so that they would not be invaded by the cold. When they arrived here, Ji-dong found that the fire element was much thinner than it was at the foot of the mountain. The red and blue light spots in his perception were very rare. Seeing that they were less than 200 meters away from the top of the mountain, the three of them found a relatively flat area to rest for the time being. Bissot let out a long breath and said, "Finally, we are almost at the top. I didn't expect this mountain to be so difficult to climb." Ji-dong said, "It seems that my judgment was wrong. It seems that we will not be able to walk out of the Frost Mountain range before the sun sets today." Carr said, "That can't be. It should be much faster to go down the mountain from now on. As long as we hurry up, it won't be a big problem." Ji-dong shook his head and said, "Such a steep mountain is not easy to go down, it will be even more difficult. You can't be careless. You must be extra careful. Later, check the rope on your body." Carr and Bissot were more and more convinced of Ji-dong. Whether it was strength or experience of living in the wild, Carr and Bissot, these 2 kids who were not even 15 years old, naturally followed Ji-dong's lead. In this kind of place, there was no shelter around them, so they were naturally not afraid of magic beasts. The three of them simply closed their eyes and began to cultivate to recover their magic and physical strength. This time, under Ji-dong's insistence, the three of them continued on their journey. They climbed the last 200 meters in one go and arrived at the top of the Frost Mountain Range's highest peak. The terrain at the top of the mountain was flat, at least 1,000 square meters. As far as the eye could see, there was a continuous range of mountain peaks. It gave the feeling of being at the top of the mountain and looking down on all the other mountains. "Haha, we have climbed to the top, ah." Bissot and Carr were, after all, still young. Seeing this marvelous scene in front of them, Bissot was the first to shout, his voice rolling through the air and refracting in the mountains. Carr also couldn't help but shout like Bissot. Bissot's voice was a little sharp, while Carr's was a lot deeper. The two's shouts were like their physical attributes, complementing each other and echoing in the mountains. Ji-dong found a protruding rock and sat down. Since they couldn't walk out of the Frost Mountain Range tonight, and it was only noon, he was in no hurry to go down the mountain. He might as well let them relax. Moreover, they were at the top of the highest peak, and the ice and snow only covered the top few hundred meters. There was no need to worry about avalanches, so he let them shout. His mental age was no longer that of a playful teenager, so he just sat there, drank water, looked at the mountains in the distance, and thought about his flaming bar. Carr and Bissot were competing in shouting. Bissot's voice was sharp and had a stronger penetrating power, while Carr's voice was loud and distant. It was as if the entire Frost Mountain Range was echoing with their shouts. The two shouted until they were hoarse before stopping. Lying on the solid snow at the top of the mountain, they looked up at the sky. "This feels so good," Carr and Bissot exclaimed almost at the same time. That feeling even made their mana flow more smoothly. Carr said, "I feel like I'm about to break through to level 12. After obtaining the Yin-Yang crown, my training speed has indeed increased. I heard that I will only encounter a second bottleneck when I condense 3 crowns. After that, my training speed will slow down due to the large difference in mana between each level." Bissot got up and laughed. "I also feel like my mana is about to break through. I definitely won't fall behind you. Once we have the strength to become 3 crowns, we can go anywhere in the world." Boss, when we get back, the three of us can travel the world together, okay? Ji-dong smiled. Who knows what will happen in the future? Let's work hard to reach 3 crowns first. Kacha, at this time, a strange sound suddenly interrupted Ji-dong and the other two's conversation. The three froze for a moment. Car also got up from the ground. Boss Bisso, did you hear that? Bisso said in surprise. I thought I heard wrong. What is that sound? Kacha, the three looked at each other. The sound seemed to be getting louder and more frequent. Car and Bisso both panicked. What's going on? Ji-dong didn't understand. It can't be an avalanche. An avalanche wouldn't make this kind of sound, and we are already at the top of the mountain. Kacha, that strange sound was like a death knell that kept ringing out, causing the hearts of Ji-dong and the other two to suddenly tighten. Bisso said anxiously, Then what do we do now? Let's go down the mountain quickly. No. Ji-dong said decisively, This sound seems to be the sound of ice cracking. If we go down rashly and encounter an avalanche, we won't even have a chance to run. Don't move, wait and see. Quickly tie the rope. The three had already untied the rope when they climbed up the mountain, and now they hurriedly tied it around their waists again. Right at this moment, a loud rumble suddenly rang out. Ji-dong and the other two were shocked to see that a corner of the mountain peak had suddenly broken off. A large piece of several dozen square meters came crashing down along the 3,000-meter-tall mountain, and without any warning, it was separated from the mountain peak. Heavens, luckily we weren't in a hurry to go down the mountain. The deafening roar fully displayed the majesty of nature. Facing such a majestic scene of nature, the three felt very small in their hearts. The cracking sound stopped, and their hearts that were in their throats gradually returned to their chests. They looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. Before they could speak again, an even more terrifying roar suddenly exploded. Ji-dong and the other two felt the ground beneath their feet become empty. Their bodies rapidly lost gravity, and in an instant they slid down. Previously, in order to avoid being affected, they subconsciously went to the center of the mountain. Who would have thought that there would be a huge crack in the middle of the mountain, as if the entire mountain had been split open by something? The three brothers suddenly slid down from the crack. Don't panic, release your magic. Ji-dong roared and yanked the rope on his body to help Bisso and Car stabilize their bodies. Looking down, he could vaguely see that the place where they fell did not seem to be very deep, only a few dozen meters. He could vaguely see the reflection of light below, and the light meant that there was a foothold. At this time, he could no longer care about hiding his strength. His ultimate dual flames burst forth in an instant, and the two colors of gold and black surged up. At the same time, he circled his hands on both sides of his body, and the glaring golden flames and the gloomy black flames were instantly raised to the peak that he could reach and gathered in front of his chest. The ultimate dual flames version of the Bing D fireball blasted down. Compared to Ji-dong's reaction, Car and Bisso were much worse. After all, they were not like Ji-dong, who had lived 2 lives. Their hearts were filled with fear when faced with such a sudden change. Under Ji-dong's reminder, they could barely gather their own magic and release their respective yin-yang crown. However, it was impossible for them to release a magic skill like Ji-dong did, especially when their Bing D fireball required the cooperation of 2 people. How could they coordinate their bodies as they fell? Boom! Ji-dong's judgment was correct. Not long after the Bing D fireball flew out, a violent roar came from below. Strong fire elements soared into the sky, bringing with it a strong airflow, and fiercely supported Ji-dong and the others, greatly slowing down their falling momentum. The distance of a few dozen meters was covered in the blink of an eye. Ji-dong's body turned halfway in the air, and all the remaining magic in his body was converted into the Bing Wu primordial sun sacred fire, and a scorching sun devour fist directly blasted down. With Ji-dong's series of actions, especially under the situation where the Bing-D fireball's energy rebounded and temporarily slowed down their fall. Carr and Bissot finally managed to react, and burst out their magic with all their strength, slapping the ground below. The roar and the explosion of fire elements sounded several times, echoing and rising in the cracks of the ice peak. At this time, the power of the magic skill was reflected. Although Ji-dong's right arm was in pain, he still relied on the ultimate dual fireball and scorching sun devour fist to resolve most of the recoil. His body rolled with all his strength the moment he landed. Although his clothes were torn by the uneven ground, and his skin was scraped, he did not suffer too much damage. Carr and Bissot's situation was much worse than Ji-dong's. The two of them used the recoil force released by their magic to counteract the impact, and directly fell to the ground and fainted. Ji-dong's chest rose and fell violently, and his whole body was emitting soreness. He had not yet recovered from the sudden change, and he struggled to get up and quickly went to Bissot and Carr. Due to the experience from his previous life, he did not directly pull the two of them, but checked their breathing and listened to their heartbeats to make sure that they were fine. They were undoubtedly lucky that their heads did not fall to the ground first, and they just temporarily fainted. Ji-dong first took off his coat and covered the two of them to keep them warm. At this time, his own magic had also been exhausted, and he could not start a fire to warm them up. On this ice peak, their fire element magic was undoubtedly greatly limited. After doing this, Ji-dong began to look around. He looked up and saw that the sky was bright, but from where they were to the top, there was at least a height of 50 meters. Moreover, the ice walls on both sides were completely vertical, and even had some opposite angles. The ice walls themselves were as smooth as a mirror. Waves of chills came, and it was easy to give people a sense of despair in such a place. Fortunately, although Ji-dong's own magic was exhausted, he still possessed the ultimate dual fire, and it was not easy for the cold to enter his body. Crack, crack. Just as Ji-dong was thinking about how to get out of this predicament, the demonic voice suddenly sounded again, and his heart immediately sank. At this time, the three of them were in the crack of the ice peak, and if the ice walls here collapsed again, they would not have any chance of survival. It was also at this time that Ji-dong suddenly saw that in the darkness at the end of the crack of the ice peak, two huge balls of blue light suddenly lit up. The lights that were like two large lanterns grew brighter and brighter as the cracking sounds intensified. An evil and cold voice suddenly sounded, echoing throughout the entire crack. "Lowly humans, it is you who have awakened my 1,000-year slumber. You will pay the price for this." What is that? Ji-dong's heart suddenly tightened. It was also at this time that an unparalleled violent roar replaced the cracking sounds, and suddenly exploded at the end of the crack. Chapter 34. What's that? Ji-dong's eyes widened. He could only feel an overwhelming, terrifying pressure sweeping towards him from the front. The pressure was almost tangible, forcing him to retreat continuously until he retreated to the side of his two companions. The pressure, which was filled with fear from the bottom of one's heart, contained an extremely cold aura. His hair, eyebrows, and the tattered clothes on his body were instantly covered with a layer of frost. Even though he possessed the ultimate dual flames, he could not help but shudder at that moment. The only thing Ji-dong could do was to force his body to stand in front of his two companions and not retreat at all. After all, he had experienced the pressure brought by the flaming bar before, so his body's resistance was quite good. The pressure he felt was different from the pressure brought by the flaming bar. The aura of the flaming bar was filled with the scorching dignity of an emperor, but the extremely cold aura in front of him was as cold and gloomy as if it came from the depths of hell. Ji-dong watched as the two balls of blue light that looked like giant lanterns moved. Amidst the violent rumble, a tornado mixed with countless ice shards rose from the deepest part of the crevice. The terrifying rumble caused the entire mountain to tremble. The strong pressure, mixed with the cold current, swept towards them. Ji Dong instinctively put his arms in front of his face and took a bow stance to defend himself. He did not know if his body would be crushed by this extremely cold aura, but as long as he still had a breath left in him, he would not let the brothers behind him be attacked by this cold current. At that moment, Ji Dong suddenly felt a heat in his hands. He unclenched his fists instinctively. The blazing sun in his right palm and the black moon in his left palm seemed to have been stimulated by the external world. They emitted a layer of misty light. Although the cold current that was sweeping towards him was powerful, it could no longer invade his body. The frost on Ji Dong's hair, temples, eyebrows, and clothes slowly melted. Indistinctly, two extremely illusory and transparent figures appeared behind Ji Dong. Although the figures were extremely blurry, they were real. One was pale gold and the other was pale gray. The burly figures with crowns on their heads stood on either side of Ji Dong's back, completely blocking the overwhelming cold. Huh! A soft sound of surprise came from the depths of the crevice. In the next moment, the soaring ice tornado stopped abruptly. This is... Ji Dong looked at the two dazzling marks on his hands in surprise. He did not feel the existence of a huge magical power, but he felt two awe-inspiring, inviolable, and incomparably proud spiritual auras. Feeling the proud will that they emitted, Ji Dong also subconsciously puffed out his chest. That's right. Under the stimulation of the cold, which was the opposite of the fire attribute, the two lords' demonic soul marks hidden in Ji Dong's palms were activated. Water subdued fire. Ice was undoubtedly a form of water, and as the pinnacle of the fire attribute, the two lords' demonic soul marks not only left the memory of their skills, but also their proud will as lords. At that moment, Ji Dong only felt that the origin yin-yang crown in his chest, which had already dried up, once again had the aura of the ultimate dual fire. It quietly moved, and the two lords will seem to merge with his own will. Although he was facing an unknown danger, at that moment there was an extremely special feeling in Ji Dong's heart. In the process of merging with the wills of the two sovereigns, his entire will was raised to an unprecedented height. He seemed to see the glory of the two sovereigns ruling over the underground world, and he could also feel their arrogant and dignified imperial auras. The fear in his heart completely disappeared at this moment, and his entire temperament also underwent a tremendous change. Irritation, wildness, anger from having his dignity violated, all sorts of emotions erupted from within Ji Dong's heart. The yin-yang crown, which was black and white, with gold and black royal stars, once again condensed above his head. The magical power that he had painstakingly cultivated for the 9 days of hell was once again sublimated under the effect of that powerful spiritual will. Although the fire element in the air was so thin, at that moment it still flocked towards his body that was like the fire seed at the center of the world. The royal stars on the yin-yang crown suddenly condensed from 1.5 to 2, and Ji Dong's strength also rose to the level of a level 14 scholar. At that moment, although his strength was still insignificant, his spiritual will was filled with the dignity of a powerhouse. The cold aura that seemed to come from the depths of hell no longer made him feel pressured at all. Boom, 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 the earth trembled amidst the rumbling. In the depths of the fissure, an incomparably huge figure was slowly emerging from the darkness. The two huge balls of blue light also swayed in the violent rumbling. Ji Dong, who was not even 15 years old, stood there with his back straight. There was only one thought in his mind. Even if he were to die here, he must not weaken the dignity of the two great sovereigns. Previously, he actually had the chance and time to summon the flaming bar's name and teleport to the Earth's core, but he did not do so. He could not abandon his brothers. In his mind, there was not even half a thought of escaping. What were brothers? Only when they lived and died together would they be brothers. The violent rumbling, every time the sound of the explosion, the air would fluctuate violently. Finally, under the light of the sky, Ji Dong could clearly see the huge figure that was gradually approaching. Even though his willpower had already merged with the two lords' spiritual imprint, when he really saw the incomparably huge figure, he could not help but gasp. Dark purple scales covered its entire body. Its terrifying body was as tall as a 5-story building, almost filling the entire fissure. Hence, the length of its body could not be seen. The pair of orange-blue light balls were its eyes. The two huge wings on its back could only be tucked behind its back. Its ferocious head was slightly lowered. The rumbling was the sound of its steps. Its thick and strong hind legs were as solid as the pier of a bridge. Droplets of saliva were dripping from its sharp teeth, which were like crisscrossing swords. What is this thing? Could it be? Ji Dong suddenly remembered a powerful and evil creature from the west in his past life, the dragon. Rumble, 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 the dragon-shaped monster was still moving forward, all the way until it was 50 meters away from Ji Dong, then it stopped. Its two huge eyes looked at the shadow behind Ji Dong in shock. Lowly human, are you the one who woke me from my slumber? Who are you? The dragon-shaped monster actually spoke the human language. It slowly lowered its head, waved its two front claws slightly, and stared at Ji Dong in an extremely human-like manner. Ji Dong said in a low voice, "If we were the ones who disturbed your sleep, I am deeply sorry. But please take note, I am a human, but not some lowly human. Who are you?" The dragon-shaped monster suddenly let out a roar towards the sky, raised its head arrogantly, and said, "I am the master of this place, the great frost dragon Feng Shuang. This mountain range is named after me. Do you think that your power is not considered lowly compared to mine? Even though I don't know where you got infected with the aura of the two sovereigns, killing you is easier than crushing an ant to me." Ji Dong said coldly, "So what? You can only take my life, but you can't make me submit." Feng Shuang slowly lowered its head, and looked at Ji Dong with a strange gaze. Although the size of their eyes was not proportionate, Ji Dong still stared back, not giving in at all. "Tell me, where did you get the aura of the two kings from, and perhaps I will let you live." Feng Shuang's fierce Hyoheim opened its mouth, revealing its eerie white teeth. Ji Dong faced it proudly and said, "Since you can see the aura of the two kings from my body, then do you think I will submit to you?" This frost dragon seemed to be enraged. It let out a violent roar, and a blinding purple light suddenly exploded from its body. Although the two sovereigns in Ji Dong's hands had released their wills due to the stimulation from the outside world, Ji Dong was still too weak. At the same time, when the light purple splendor flashed, he only felt his entire body turn cold. The light released from his palms instantly dimmed, and the aura of the two sovereigns was completely suppressed. That overwhelming chill had already rushed over along with the spread of the purple light. Am I going to leave this world? Ji Dong's proud eyes suddenly became a little dazed. He did not try to escape or react in any way, because he knew that it was all in vain. At this moment, he was more than willing to recall the most beautiful memories of his life in the last moments of his life. He had been in this world for 4 years, and was about to return to the embrace of the god of death again. However, he did not regret it and thought that in this world, he had gotten to know the flaming bar. A gentle smile appeared on Ji Dong's frozen face. The frost dragon in front of him seemed to no longer exist, and what was left was a figure that was like a fire elf. A longing look appeared in Ji Dong's eyes, and he silently poured out his heart. "Flaming bar, do you know that I love you? You are the first woman that I have ever fallen in love with. Although I can no longer see you and make drinks for you, to be able to know you, to be able to think of your death, to me, is also a kind of happiness. I still owe you 95 years. If there is a next life, if I can live it again, I will definitely look for you again." A crystal-clear tear rolled down from the corner of Ji Dong's right eye. Almost at the same moment it appeared, it had already turned into a water droplet, and quietly rolled down. Purple had already appeared in every corner of his vision. At this moment, Ji Dong suddenly felt a pain in his heart, and an indescribable heat instantly engulfed his entire body. The purple in front of him suddenly turned red, and layers of red light, like a thin veil, spread out with his body as the center, like pieces of unfolding flower petals. The intense purple light stopped in an instant, as if it had come to an emergency brake, and disappeared. The incomparably huge frost dragon, Feng Shuang, appeared in Ji Dong's vision once again. Its mouth was wide open, and its huge blue eyes were filled with shock. Time and space seemed to have stopped at this moment. Even the ice tear that had rolled down from the corner of Ji Dong's eye froze in midair. Patches of red light quietly spread out, and finally turned into a brilliant red lotus that appeared under Ji Dong's feet, supporting his body. At this moment, a fair and tender hand, with slender fingers and skin as white as snow, cut through the void and quietly emerged from Ji Dong's body. It stretched out its index and middle fingers, and gently pinched the crystal-clear ice droplet. In the next moment, the fiery red figure seemed to have taken a step out from Ji Dong's body. She took a step out of the frozen air, and quietly appeared in front of Ji Dong. Even though he was only looking at her back, Ji Dong's vision blurred in an instant. He could no longer tell whether what was happening in front of him was real or an illusion. At this moment, there was only satisfaction in his heart. Even if his soul was to scatter in the next moment, he was willing to do so. He had finally seen the flaming bar before he died, and saw the figure that had haunted his dreams. How could he not recognize the flawless back view of her thousands of times? Roar! Feng Shuang let out a low roar. However, this roar was many times weaker than when it was facing Ji Dong. It sounded more like a whimper. However, this low roar had awakened Ji Dong from his hazy state. He shivered, and Ji Dong suddenly understood. He took a big stride to the side of the flaming bar. In a flash, he used his average-sized body and shoulders to block the front of the flaming bar. Flaming bar, leave quickly. Don't worry about me. Why did you come? Let's go, it might be a level 10 water attribute divine beast. At this moment, Ji Dong was no longer as arrogant and cold as before. His eyes were filled with anxiety. Water countered fire, and he was facing a level 10 divine beast. Even though he knew that the flaming bar was very powerful, he also understood the power of elemental counters. He was not willing to see the goddess in his heart get hurt. Even though he was so insignificant in front of the frost dragon, he still blocked in front of her without any hesitation. The flaming bar naturally did not leave. Strangely, the frost dragon did not make any further move. She slowly raised her hand. The flaming bar watched quietly as the frozen teardrop in her palm slowly melted and seeped into her skin. Her eyes seemed to have an additional layer of red light. Flaming bar, leave quickly, Ji Dong urged anxiously. He spread his arms in front of the flaming bar and looked back at her. He saw the calm expression on the flaming bar's face and the faint red light in her eyes. In the next moment, the flaming bar had already grabbed his right hand and gently pulled him to her side. Kneel. A melodious voice that was filled with an unquestionable aura rang out from the flaming bar's mouth. Just as Ji Dong was feeling confused, a loud rumble came from the opposite side. The frost dragon, who had been extremely arrogant just a moment ago, actually knelt on the ground with a thud. Chapter 35. Ji Dong was shocked. He had never expected such a scene to unfold before his eyes. The anxiety and nervousness in his heart had turned into a special and unusual emotion. He knew that the flaming bar was powerful, but he never expected that the flaming bar would be so powerful that a giant dragon, who was supposed to be at the peak of the world of Warcraft, would kneel down with just one sentence. Moreover, it was a giant dragon whose element was the nemesis of the flaming bar. The flaming bar's red lips hummed, and a unique voice and intonation came out of her mouth. The incomprehensible intonation was still so pleasant to the ears because it came from her mouth. There was no need to worry about her safety. At that moment, Ji Dong only had eyes for her. The depression in his heart for the past few days had completely disappeared at this moment. At his most dangerous moment she had come. Just this alone was enough to explain everything. It meant that he still had a place in her heart. He didn't know where raging flames came from, nor would he think about it. He only needed to know that she was right in front of him, and he was still holding onto her soft and smooth jade hand. That was enough. Hearing the flaming bar's words, the giant dragon Frost was completely prostrated on the ground. Its body was even trembling, and it no longer had the dignity of a giant dragon. The flaming bar's body emitted a faint glow. The formless majesty was not strong, but the giant dragon Frost did not even dare to raise its head to look at her. It only let out whimpering sounds. The flaming bar's voice suddenly became stern. The giant dragon Frost carefully got up, and there was only a pleading look in her blue eyes. A faint cold light flashed across the flaming bar's eyes. She switched back to human language and said, "I will only say this once." Suddenly being able to understand Raging Flame's words, Ji Dong subconsciously looked at the pitiful giant ice dragon. The giant ice dragon Feng Shuang was as silent as a cicada in winter, not daring to make a sound. It took a step back, and with a bang, its foot stomped on the hard ice, creating a 2-meter-deep dent. The flaming bar pulled Ji Dong forward. Almost every step they took, the giant dragon Frost took a step back. With such a huge body, it looked at the flaming bar with a fawning look in its eyes. The flaming bar pulled Ji Dong all the way to the hole. She let go of Ji Dong's hand and pointed at the hole in front of them. Hyoheim said, "Take off your clothes and lie down." Ji Dong was stunned. The flaming bar turned to look at him. From her eyes, Ji Dong could clearly see a hint of gentleness. Seeing this gentleness, Ji Dong felt hot blood rushing to his brain. Even if it was the lava of the Earth's core lake, he would do it without hesitation, let alone a 2-meter-deep hole in front of him. He had already given his outer clothes to Kar and Bissot. Now, he was only left with his inner clothes. He quickly took off his clothes, leaving only his underwear, and was about to jump into the hole. "Take them all off." A faint blush appeared on the pretty face of the flaming bar. She was incomparably beautiful. She turned her head away and no longer looked at Ji Dong. Ji Dong looked at himself, then at the flaming bar. He could not help but feel awkward. However, he still gritted his teeth and took off the last piece of clothing on his body. Then, he jumped into the hole. The snow dragon, Feng Shuang, had been watching the scene in front of her with her eyes wide open. When she saw the blush on the face of the flaming bar, she opened her mouth wide enough to swallow a horse carriage. She was so shocked that her dragon eyes almost popped out of their socket. The flaming bar seemed to feel Feng Shuang's gaze. She glanced at her coldly and said, "What are you looking at? Hurry up." "Oh." Feng Shuang nodded her head pitifully. However, her feet seemed to be rubbing against the ground as she walked forward. Her upper body was leaning back slightly, as if the flaming bar was the most terrifying existence in the world. She did not dare to go near her. The cold in the hole was undeniable, especially when one was naked. Fortunately, Ji Dong's ultimate dual flames had recovered a little when he sensed the wills of the two great sovereigns. That was how he was able to resist the cold from the outside world. The head of the snow dragon, Feng Shuang, appeared above the hole. She raised one of her front claws. After hesitating for a while, she finally placed the dragon claw into her huge mouth. Under the shocked gaze of Ji Dong, she bit down hard. "Why is she biting me?" Ji Dong wondered in his heart. In the next moment, sticky, dark purple blood spurted out from the claw of the snow dragon, Feng Shuang. It fell into the hole like a fountain, instantly covering Ji Dong's body. An extreme chill instantly spread throughout his body. The blood of the snow dragon, Feng Shuang, was even colder than ice. Ji Dong wanted to jump out of reflex, but the voice of the flaming bar rang in his ears. "Lie down, don't move." Gritting his teeth, Ji Dong resisted the urge to jump. At this moment, the dark purple blood had completely covered his body. He could not even breathe. At this moment, he could not move even if he wanted to, because the dark purple blood had quickly solidified, sealing him inside. The body of the snow dragon, Feng Shuang, was too huge. The amount of blood was also enough to make one's hair stand on end. In just a short while, the 2 meters deep and 2 meters wide hole was filled up. Feng Shuang blew on the dragon's claw like a miser. In an instant, the wound had completely solidified. In the next moment, the huge wound had actually healed. There was one thing that Ji Dong's judgment was right. The gigantic dragon in front of him was indeed one of the most powerful magical beasts in the world. The flaming bar once again spoke in a language that Ji Dong did not understand. The snow dragon, Feng Shuang, raised its chest helplessly. It used its injured claw to carefully peel off a purple crystal-like scale at the bottom of its neck. The dragon's claw lightly pierced into it, and a drop of bright purple blood dripped down, merging with the dark purple blood that had already solidified. In an instant, a layer of purple light rose from the hole. The entire crevice of the ice valley was filled with surging mana ripples. The eyes of the snow dragon, which did not react much after losing so much blood, became much dimmer after the drop of bright purple blood. It lay on the ground in exhaustion, looking pitifully at the flaming bar. Raging Flame nodded in satisfaction and walked to the ice pit. Under the incredulous gaze of the frost dragon, Feng Shuang, she put her spring-like right index finger into her mouth and bit it lightly. In the next moment, a drop of golden-red blood had already popped out from her fingertip and fell into the ice pit. Although Ji Dong was unable to breathe in the ice hole, and was also attacked by the extreme cold, he did not lose consciousness due to the heat provided by the yin-yang corona. When the drop of bright purple blood from the ice dragon Feng Shuang dripped into the ice pit, he felt his body suddenly tighten. The bone-piercing chill from before seemed to have turned into countless icicles, piercing through his body in an instant. Other than his will, he could no longer feel his own existence. However, when Raging Flame's drop of blood fell into the ice pit, the purple light in the ice pit instantly increased, turning from purple to red. Previously, it was still in the form of solid ice, but in the next moment it had completely melted. All the chill disappeared in an instant, and the dark purple dragon blood with a layer of red halo actually began to boil just like that. However, the bubbling deep purple dragon blood wasn't scorching hot. Instead, it was warm, quietly dispersing the chill in Ji Dong's body and allowing him to regain his senses. The numbness and itchiness came from his limbs and bones, as if there were tiny needles pricking him. He could not tell if it was pain or pleasure. That indescribable feeling caused Ji Dong's body to twist uncontrollably in the dragon blood. The flaming bar's voice sounded in the depths of Ji Dong's heart. No matter how painful it is, you must endure it. Although Feng Shuang is an ice dragon and his blood contains an extremely cold aura, the attribute has been neutralized by my blood. Now there is only the most basic dragon blood left. The dragon blood will soak your skin, flesh, meridians, bones, marrow, and organs. Your body is too weak. Although the baptism of the dragon blood will not increase your cultivation, it will give you a tough body. Activate your yin-yang corona and accelerate the absorption of the essence of the dragon blood. When you really can't take it anymore, come out to breathe and continue absorbing. Unable to breathe, Ji Dong's chest felt like it was going to explode. However, when he heard the voice of the flaming bar, he immediately calmed down. Towards the flaming bar, he did not feel any gratitude towards the flaming bar. There was only an indescribable feeling. At this moment, the first thing that came to his mind was that he could not let the flaming bar down. Then, he thought about his body's condition. The yin-yang corona was activated instantly. The vortex formed by the ultimate dual flames in his chest began to spin rapidly. His blood flowed rapidly. He could feel the numbness and itchiness getting stronger and stronger. He clenched his teeth and endured it. At the beginning, the numbness and itchiness was only on his skin. However, as time passed, the numbness and itchiness gradually spread to his muscles, bones, fascia, and even his internal organs. Finally, Ji-dong could not endure it any longer. He abruptly popped his head out of the dragon's blood and gasped for breath. He immediately saw the focused gaze of the flaming bar. His chest rose and fell violently. Ji-dong once again sank into the dragon's blood. No matter how strong the numbness and itchiness was, it could not shake his arrogant and dignified will that had already been infected by the two sovereigns. The flaming bar did not mention that her drop of blood not only neutralized the ice attribute of the dragon's blood, but also acted as a catalyst for the dragon's blood. It caused the energy within the dragon's blood to completely explode and fuse with Ji-dong's body in a short period of time. Only by doing this could the effects of the dragon's blood be preserved to the greatest extent and fuse with Ji-dong's body. Gradually, the numbness and itchiness disappeared. Ji-dong only felt that his body was very hot, so hot that it felt like he was cooked. The numbness and itchiness in his limbs and bones had completely turned into a surging heat that nourished his body. All the pain had turned into incomparable comfort at this moment. All the bones in his body continuously emitted crackling sound. His tendons, skin, and muscles all became extremely resilient at this moment. Ji-dong stretched his body forcefully. He only felt that every part of his body seemed to be under the control of his thoughts. He had never stretched like this before. With a slight movement, his entire body seemed to be filled with explosive power. It had nothing to do with mana. It was completely bursting out from his physical body. He did not know if it was the effect of the drop of blood from the flaming bar, but at this moment, the ultimate dual flames in Ji-dong's body had completely recovered to its optimal state. At this moment, the dark purple dragon blood had already faded, leaving only a light pink color. Obviously, the effects of the dragon blood had been completely absorbed by Ji-dong. With a poof, Ji-dong drilled out of the dragon blood. Under his forceful stretching, he seemed to have grown a little taller. There was a faint purple light flowing under his bronze-colored skin that was emitting hot steam. The lines of his muscles became more obvious, but not exaggerated. He looked like the most streamlined sports car. The flaming bar suddenly turned his head and said, "Come up, quickly put on your clothes." Only then did Ji-dong remember that he was naked. Moreover, he did not know if it was due to the stimulation of the dragon blood, but a certain part of his body was still full of strength. After putting on his clothes awkwardly, Ji-dong said, "The flaming bar, my two classmates." The flaming bar waved his hand and said, "They both have fire elemental bodies, so they will be fine. As for the dragon blood, I only care about you, so these are no longer effective. As the saying goes, share blessings with others." Of course, Ji-dong did not expect the giant frost dragon to produce any more blood. He also did not want the flaming bar to lose more blood. He was only thinking about whether the dragon blood that he had used before would still be effective. He wanted to give it to Kar and Bissot to soak in it as well. However, the flaming bar saw through him and rejected his idea. "Give it to me." The flaming bar suddenly extended his right hand towards the giant frost dragon, Feng Shuang. The unquestionable authority in his voice caused Feng Shuang to tremble uncontrollably. It looked at the flaming bar with a pleading expression. This time, its huge dragon head shook even more violently. Although it was extremely afraid, its eyes revealed a determined look. "Do you want me to repeat myself?" There seemed to be a faint flame dancing in the flaming bar's eyes. In response, the giant frost dragon, Feng Shuang, quickly took a step back. It slowly raised its dragon claw unwillingly and drew something in the air. It muttered something in a language that Ji-dong could not understand. A strange purple symbol appeared in the air. In the next moment, with a tearing sound, a door appeared in the air. This dragon could actually tear space apart? This was completely different from the function of his storage bracelet. What kind of power did one need to be able to create one's own space? However, it was still so afraid of the flaming bar. Ji Dong knew that he had underestimated the woman that he had been dreaming of all this while. The giant frost dragon, Feng Shuang, reached its dragon claw into the door and took out something unwillingly. It was an egg with alternating red and black lines. It was perfectly round and had a diameter of 3 meters. It emitted a red light that alternated between bright and dark. The giant frost dragon's eyes were filled with sorrow as it placed the huge egg in front of the flaming bar. Ji Dong was shocked by too many things today. What was this huge egg? Could it be? Chapter 36. Seeing the frost dragon Feng Shuang obediently hand over what she wanted, the flaming bar's expression softened a little. Feng Shuang whispered to Hyoheim, "Great human demon master, can you help me? As long as you can get Her Majesty to return it to me, I am willing to sign an equal contract with you and become your mount. How about it? You human demon masters can only have mounts after reaching the 6 crowns, but you can have one now. Our equal contract can last for 100 years, and I will protect you faithfully. I am an adult frost dragon, with the strength of a 10th-class magical beast. In the human world, there are very few who can fight against me. With me here, you will become the 5th dragon demon master of the human world, and become the most powerful demon master." Ji Dong knew what the word demon master meant. It was a title that only the highest-ranked demon masters could add to their titles. When they were studying in the Fire Academy, Teacher Xia Tian had told them that the highest exclusive title for a fire demon master was called Xing Guang, while the highest exclusive title for a Fuhua series demon master was called Tai Yi. A fire demon master who had reached the 9 crowns would be called Xing Guang demon master, while the Fuhua series would be called Tai Yi demon master. Ji Dong understood that this frost dragon was not exaggerating. With its strength, it should be equivalent to a human demon master. However, what shocked the frost dragon was that Ji Dong shook his head and said, "I don't need your contract. Firstly, you are a water demon beast, and I am a fire demon master. You are not suitable for me. Secondly, wealth cannot be corrupted, poverty cannot be swayed, and power cannot be subdued. When I was weak, you called me a lowly human. When the flaming bar appeared, you called me a great human. Although you are strong, you are so fickle and have no integrity. I don't need a mount like you." Hearing Ji Dong's words, the snow dragon Feng Shuang was stunned. There seemed to be something else in her dragon eyes. Flaming Bar was also looking at Ji Dong. A strange light flashed across her clear and deep eyes. Ji Dong turned to the Flaming Bar and said, "Flaming Bar, although I despise its character, this is a dragon egg, right? No matter how bad it is, we don't have the right to take away its child. To any living creature, a child is the most precious. Can we return it to it?" Raging Flames raised a hand and placed it on the red and black dragon egg. Even such a simple action caused the ice and snow dragon's heartbeat to suddenly accelerate. "Do you think this is its child? This is a fire dragon's egg. Do you think that an ice dragon would give birth to a fire dragon's egg?" It killed a fire dragon and snatched this dragon egg. In order to avoid being hunted down, it sealed itself in ice. It has been 1,000 years. Dragons are lustful by nature. Its goal is to find an opportunity to hatch this dragon egg and keep it as its pet slave. Feng Shuang is a male dragon. The unborn child in this fire dragon's egg is a female dragon. At this point, the Flaming Bar no longer needed to explain. Ji Dong glared at the frost dragon Feng Shuang angrily. Feng Shuang also knew that he definitely did not have a chance. He dejectedly withdrew his head and looked at the fire dragon egg with an unwilling expression. Only then did he slowly retreat into the crevice of the icy mountain, quietly disappearing into the darkness. The Flaming Bar gently stroked the huge fire dragon's egg in front of her and said calmly, "Are you wondering why it is so afraid of me?" Ji Dong did not hide his inner thoughts and nodded. The Flaming Bar turned to look at Hyoheim and said, Do you remember when I told you that there are 18 levels of the underground world? This is an entrance to the underground world. 1,000 years ago, Feng Shuang offended the powerful fire dragon. Hence, he sought the protection of the underground world and is responsible for guarding this place. Although I cannot use any of my powers in the human world, it is bound by a contract with the underground world. How could it dare to disobey my orders? Ji Dong could not help but ask, Flaming Bar, you are so powerful in the underground world. You can even travel between the underground world and the surface. Why can't you use your powers on the surface? The Flaming Bar laughed softly and said, Now is not the time for you to know. When you have the power to protect me, I will naturally tell you. I have to go back. These few days I seem to have noticed that you have not been cultivating properly. If you do not have the power to protect me as soon as possible, how can I come to the human world to look for you? Feng Shuang will send you back to the peak of the mountain. Don't forget what I said before. Don't tell anyone about me. Also, the wine you have been mixing these few days is a little bitter. I don't like it. You still have to slowly repay the 95 years you owe me. She raised her hand and gently caressed the left side of Ji Dong's chest. Just as Ji Dong was about to say something, she had already turned into a ray of red light and disappeared. Ji Dong only felt pain in his chest again. A huge red lotus quietly appeared under his feet. 2 of its petals extended out and wrapped around the fire dragon's egg. Then, it disappeared along with the Flaming Bar. The Flaming Bar had left, but it did not take away Ji Dong's happy mood. She had saved his people, and this had reignited the happiness in his heart. To Ji Dong, what mattered was that the Flaming Bar was still drinking his wine and still cared about him. That was enough for him. A chilling energy surged out from the depths of the crack. It instantly engulfed Ji Dong, Kar, and Biss's bodies. Their bodies felt light, and in the next moment, he and his 2 brothers had already returned to the peak of the mountain. Pushing aside the dark clouds and seeing the bright moon, Ji Dong could not help but let out a long roar just like Kar and Biss so. This time, it would no longer bring trouble, but only an extremely carefree release. Ji Dong silently made up his mind. Flaming Bar, don't worry. I will definitely cultivate hard. If you come to the human world in the future, I will use my life to protect you. Earth's core lake. The red light condensed, and the Flaming Bar quietly returned to this blazing world. The fire dragon's egg lay quietly beside her. At this moment, her expression was completely different from when she had left Ji Dong. She raised her right hand, opened her palm, and looked at the empty palm. That was the spot where the tear had seeped into. Ji Dong, do you know? You've really caused ripples in my heart. Why is it that when I face you, I can't even choose to escape? Since I can't escape, let me watch you grow stronger and stronger. As he muttered to himself, the Flaming Bar waved his right hand, and the huge fire dragon's egg floated in midair. Layers of black and gold mana surged continuously from the lava lake under the Flaming Bar's will, and tightly wrapped around the fire dragon's egg, forming a huge shell of light. The Flaming Bar muttered a few words, and the black and gold shell of light solidified completely, bringing the fire dragon's egg with it as it slowly sank into the lava lake. Ji Dong, I'll nourish it for you. When you have enough power, I'll give it to you. Boss, thank you for saving us. On the snowy peak, Kar and Biss woke up one after the other. Although the 2 of them had suffered some injuries, the yin and yang magician's physique, in addition to their own fire attributes, did not suffer from the cold, nor were they seriously injured. Ji Dong did not tell them about the existence of the frost dragon, Feng Shuang. Otherwise, he would not be able to explain how he was able to survive in front of a 10th-level magical beast. He only told Kar and Biss that after falling into the crevice, he had slowly melted a hole in the ice wall, forming an ice ladder, and helped them climb out. Since we're brothers, let's not talk about this. Hurry up and recover, we'll leave this place as soon as possible. Ji Dong said to the 2 of them. Carr and Bissot nodded and immediately entered a state of cultivation. They needed to recover their magic and physical strength, while Ji Dong also seized the time to recover his cultivation. When he saw the flaming bar again, the darkness in his heart had long been replaced by a thirst for power. Why would he waste any more time? The three of them only woke up from their cultivation when the sun was setting in the west. Taking advantage of the fact that the sky was not completely dark, they quickly descended the icy peak and spent another night in the Frost Mountain Range. At noon the next day, they finally walked out of the mountain range and set foot on the territory of the Central Plains Empire. After replenishing their supplies in the Wind Soil City, which was only 50 miles away from the Frost Mountain Range, they immediately boarded the horse carriage to the Central Plains City. The Central Plains Empire was vast and rich in resources. The entire empire was mainly composed of plains. Ji Dong and the other two spent 4 days in the horse carriage and finally arrived at their destination. In order to be able to continuously cultivate on the road, they purposely spent a gold coin to reserve a horse carriage. Apart from the coachman, there were only the three of them in the spacious horse carriage. As it turned out, this choice was very correct. Passing through the Frost Mountain Range not only rekindled Ji Dong's desire to cultivate after seeing the flaming bar, but it also made Carr and Bissot realize that they were not strong enough. Within 4 days, they had reached the peak of level 11 and finally completed the breakthrough. The day before they arrived at the Central Plains City, they had broken through and reached the level 12 scholar level. We're finally here. Cultivating on the bumpy horse carriage is really a chore. Bissot stretched his body. While Bissot was grumbling, Ji Dong and Carr were observing the largest city on the mainland. Before entering the city, they were shocked once. The walls of the Central Plains City were extremely wide. When they were outside the city, they actually felt that they could not see the end of it. If they were to run around the city once, they might not be able to finish it even in 2 days. The wide, earthy yellow city walls gave off an extremely heavy feeling. The city walls were at least 20 feet tall. It was unknown how much manpower and resources were spent to build such a wide city wall. On the thick city walls, there was a huge pattern every 50 meters. The pattern was carved, and there were a total of 2 appearances. One was a large silver bird, flapping its wings high in the sky, and the other was the appearance of a 3-wood fish. From Ji Dong's point of view, it looked like a 3-eyed whale. Of course, these 2 patterns wouldn't appear on the city walls of the Central Plains City for no reason. They were the totems of the Yang Earth element and the Yin Earth element respectively, which were the 5th Earth element and the 6th Earth element respectively. The big silver bird was called Sky, while the 3-eyed whale was called Sky. Ji Dong didn't know much about these 2 totems, but he guessed that they were the same as the vermilion bird and the flying serpent, which were the totems of the Yang Fire and the Yin Fire respectively. After entering the Central Plains City, the first thing they felt was a magnificent atmosphere. All of the buildings were very tall and wide. They were mainly square. Just like the buildings in the Southern Fire Empire were mostly red, the buildings in the Central Plains City were mostly Yang Earth yellow. The wide streets could accommodate 8 large horse carriages side by side. The shops on both sides of the streets even had their own gatehouses. Since there was still 1 day before the entrance exam, the 3 of them weren't in a hurry. They just wandered on the streets and prepared to find a hotel to stay in first. As they were walking, Ji Dong suddenly stopped. His eyes fell on a particularly huge building on the side of the main road. The reason why he noticed this building was that it was not a square building. It had a very strange rectangular gatehouse. On the gatehouse, there was a huge logo with a diameter of more than 3 meters. On the logo, there was a wine shaker. There were 5 rings around the shaker, which were cyan, red, yellow, white, and black. What's this? Ji Dong's heart moved. Carr and Bissot's eyes also followed his gaze. Bissot smiled and said, "This is the Bartenders Guild, right? It should be the Central Plains City branch. No wonder it is the largest city in the continent. It is indeed different. I have been to the Blazing Fire City, the capital of the Southern Fire Empire. There is also a bartender's guild there, but the building is much smaller than this. Boss, look, that shaker is the logo of the bartender's guild. The 5 rings represent the 5 elements, and also represent the 5 empires. It means that no matter which country you are in, you will need bartenders. It is said that the headquarters of the Bartenders Guild is in the North Water Empire. They have the most excellent bartenders there. Bisu's words were the same as Ji-dong's, but he just looked at it a few more times and continued to walk forward. Carr said, "Boss, don't you want to go in and take a look? Since you are so good at mixing drinks, it shouldn't be difficult to get the bartender title. It will be more convenient to do anything in the future. I heard that bartenders are treated very well. If you can get the master title, you can also receive benefits from the guild." Ji-dong shook his head and glanced at the Bartenders Guild logo. He continued to walk forward. As the god of wine in his previous life, it was a joke for him to take the bartender qualification test. He didn't want to go to such a place. In this life, his pursuit had changed from wine to magic cultivation. At the same time, he was also confident that in the field of bartending, even in this world where there were magic masters, no one could surpass him. Chapter 37. He's young, but he's arrogant. Being a bartender is a noble occupation. Not everyone can pass the exam. Does he think he can join our Bartenders Guild? At this moment, a disdainful voice sounded not far from Ji-dong and the other two. Ji-dong and the other two looked in the direction of the voice and saw a well-dressed young man in a gorgeous robe in his 20s walking past them. As he walked, he looked at Ji-dong with disdain and kept shaking his head. Bisso said angrily, "What's so great about taking the exam to be a bartender? My boss is the best bartender." The young man was about to walk past them, but when he heard the words, "the best bartender," he immediately stopped and said, "You're really full of yourself. Even the god of wine, Du Sikong, didn't say that he was the best. Who do you think you are? You haven't even grown your hair yet, and you're already so full of yourself. Get lost, don't be an eyesore here." Originally, Ji-dong didn't care much about the young man's sarcasm. In his previous life, he was used to being a maverick and didn't care what others thought of him. However, the young man's arrogant words not only scolded him, but also scolded his 2 brothers. In the world of magic, Ji-dong wasn't a big deal, but in the world of bartenders, he couldn't tolerate such humiliation. With 2 hands, he pulled Carr and Bisso, who were about to rush forward. Ji-dong said calmly, "Fine, I'll let you know what I am. Bisso, Carr, let's go." After saying that, he forcefully pulled his 2 angry brothers away, turned around, and left. The young man spat in disdain and arrogantly walked toward the Bartenders Guild. "Boss, that bastard insulted us like that. Why did you stop us? This isn't your style," Bisso said with great dissatisfaction. Ji-dong patted Bissu's shoulder and said, "He will pay for what he said just now. Bisso, Carr, do me a favor. Carr, go buy a rectangular table, 1.5 meters in height and at least 2 meters in width. Bisso, help me buy a piece of white cloth, a bamboo pole and a pen." Bisso and Carr looked at each other and said in unison, "Boss, you." Ji-dong smiled coldly and said, "Haven't you heard of smashing a place? What's the use of bickering? Even if you beat him up, would he be convinced? You have to speak with facts." Bisso and Carr's eyes lit up. They were all youngsters. As the saying goes, newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. They weren't people who were afraid of trouble. Looking at Ji-dong's arrogant and firm gaze, they immediately became excited and turned around to leave without hesitation. Ji-dong stood on the side of the street and quietly gazed at the tall building of the Bartenders Guild. He breathed in an extremely rhythmic manner. Bartending was an art. Different moods would make different cocktails. What Ji-dong needed now was peace. Only in this state could he accept any challenge. After a while, Carr and Bisso had already returned. In the vast Central Plains city, it was very easy to find such simple things. Ji-dong took the table from Car's hands. At this moment, his gaze had already become extremely calm. It was like the surface of a windless lake, without a trace of emotion. Walking to the front of the Bartenders Guild's archway, Ji-dong put down the table and took the white cloth from Bisu's hands. He spread it flat on the table and picked up a pen. His pen moved like a dragon and a snake, and he wrote a few big words. There were 2 guards in front of the Bartenders Guild's main entrance. Seeing the 3 of them stop in front of the Bartenders Guild's main entrance, they immediately walked up. However, they were only ordinary people. How could Car and Bisu allow them to disturb Ji-dong? Each of them blocked one of the guards. Ji-dong used a bamboo pole to pick up the white cloth and said to the 2 guards, "Tell the people of the Bartenders Guild that I will wait here for them for 2 hours. If no one dares to accept the challenge, I will tear down the emblem on the archway." With a swing of the bamboo pole, the white cloth had already unfolded in the wind. There were 9 big words on it. It was written, "Does the Bartenders Guild dare to accept the challenge?" The 2 guards looked at each other. It was obviously the first time for them to encounter such a situation. One of them stayed at the door, and the other quickly ran in the direction of the guild. Car laughed and said, "Boss, these words of yours are too imposing. However, the Bartenders Guild's branch in Central Plain City should be second only to the headquarters in the entire bartending industry." "Boss, you," Ji-dong waved his hand at him and said, "It doesn't matter. Just wait and see." Looking at Ji-dong's calm arrogance, Car and Bisu felt their blood boiling. Placing a table in front of the guild's main entrance to issue a challenge was like a slap to the guild's face. Ji-dong was not even 15 years old, but his courage had already made the 2 brothers admire him from the bottom of their hearts. Moreover, it was obvious that Ji-dong's courage was not as simple as it seemed. Under the sunlight, his black hair exuded a faint purple color. His calm eyes were filled with a kind of domineering aura. He looked at the direction of the Bartenders Guild with an imposing manner. Ji-dong consecutively took out 9 crystal shakers from his storage bracelet and lined them up on the rectangular table in front of him. He stood with his hands behind his back and stared at the Bartenders Guild, waiting quietly. It didn't take long for 3 people to emerge from the Bartenders Guild. Aside from the guard who'd gone to call for Ji-dong and the others, there was an old man and a young man. The young man was the one who'd insulted Ji-dong's group earlier. The old man looked to be in his 50s, and he was clad in a light yellow robe with 4 stars on the left side of his chest. Ji-dong had once heard Yang Bingtian mention that on the 5 Elements continent, bartenders had a clear classification, ranging from 1 star to 9 stars. With the most basic level of 1 star, one could be qualified to be a bartender. 4 stars symbolized the standard of a master. As for the highest level of 9 stars, there was only one person in the entire continent, and that was the president of the Bartender Guild. The god of wine, Dusikong. "It's you brats who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. How dare you cause trouble in front of our Bartenders Guild? Do you want to die?" Once the young man saw Ji-dong and the other 2, he immediately ran over angrily. "Enough, Night Sorrow. Don't be rude." The old man caught up and stopped the young man from continuing. He first looked at the 9 shakers on the table in front of Ji-dong and then looked at Hyoheim. He said amiably, "Little brother, how has our guild offended you? What are you doing?" Ji-dong said faintly, "Just now, this person asked me what I am. I'm here to tell him." At that time, he called himself a member of the Bartenders Guild. "Since that's the case, I'll also tell the Bartenders Guild what I am." The old man glanced at the young man called Night Sorrow angrily and said, "Night Sorrow, even though you've already passed 2 stars, how can you ruin the guild's reputation outside?" Night Sorrow wanted to explode, but seeing the old man's unfriendly gaze, he resentfully didn't speak. The old man turned to Hyoheim again and said, "Little brother, I'm Wei Hong of the Bartenders Guild. If I offended you in any way just now, I apologize on behalf of Night Sorrow." Let's forget about this challenge. Ji Dong glanced at him and said, "Hello, Mr. Wei Hong. I'm very sorry, but I cannot accept your apology. It's not that you've insulted me or my friends. Since I've already placed the table here, there's no way I can take it back easily. I will stay here for 2 hours. As long as it's a member of the Bartenders Guild, anyone can defeat me in bartending. Then, I will immediately kowtow to your guild 3 times and call you master, then turn around and leave. If no one can defeat me within 2 hours, my request is very simple. Have him kneel in front of me in front of the Bartenders Guild, kowtow to me 3 times and call me the god of wine. Otherwise, if he's not willing, you have to take down the emblem on the archway." When he said the last sentence, Ji Dong's voice was resolute and his gaze was even more powerful. His entire person exuded a wild and domineering aura. At this moment, he seemed to have returned to his previous life and became the god of wine, Lithering. His words didn't leave any room for negotiation. Hearing his words, not only Night Sorrow couldn't help but clamor, even the bartender Wei Hong's expression couldn't help but change. Ji Dong's words clearly didn't put the Bartenders Guild in his eyes. Just like what he had said to Carr and Bissot, he was here to cause trouble. Wei Hong said in a low voice, "Little brother, don't go overboard. If you're so aggressive, do you think your teacher will indulge you?" Ji Dong smiled coldly and said, "In this world, there is no one who can be my bartending teacher. Don't waste my time. You have the smell of aged vodka and lemon on you. If I'm not wrong, you should be good at mixing cocktails with vodka as the base. Your hands are wide and your palms are thick. You should be good at mixing cocktails with rotation. It's a pity that you're old and too calm. You've lost the fiery heat of vodka. No matter how hard you work, no matter how skilled you are, you won't be able to bring out the true essence of vodka. You're no match for me. Go get someone of a higher level." As he spoke, Ji Dong raised his right hand and a shaker appeared in his palm. With a flick of his wrist, the shaker flew into the air. With a slight movement of his shoulder, the rapidly spinning shaker shone like a silver sun in the air. Without any preheating, 3 silver suns appeared above Ji Dong's head and on both sides of his body. This was the 3 suns reflect the moon that he had used to attract Yang Bingtian's attention. However, compared to before, he was many times more relaxed now. After soaking in dragon blood, although Ji Dong wasn't even 15 years old yet, his body had long surpassed the peak of his previous life. All of his bartending skills could be completely put into action. This was also why he had such confidence and stood proudly in front of the Bartenders Guild. The current him had completely recovered all of the god of wine Lithering's abilities and confidence. Night Sorrow's clamoring stopped abruptly. He stared dumbfoundedly at the shaker that had been placed back on the table. Wei Hong's expression also instantly became serious. At this moment, he understood that the young man in front of him wasn't simply acting out of spite. Although he could also do the 3 suns reflect the moon that Ji Dong had, he knew that he couldn't do it as calmly as Ji Dong. In particular, Ji Dong's previous words had clearly described his most proficient ability. It had to be known that if there was no wine in the shaker would become even lighter. Furthermore, it wouldn't be able to use the inertia of the liquid in the shaker to rotate. It looked like Ji Dong had only used an empty shaker, but he was also a bartender. How could he not understand this logic? At this moment, the surroundings were already surrounded by passers-by. The words on the white cloth and the formation that Ji Dong had set up were enough to attract a large number of curious onlookers. Especially when he used the 3 suns reflect the moon, there were even more people who applauded. Night Sorrow's expression was very awkward. At this moment, he also understood that he seemed to have provoked someone he shouldn't have. However, he clearly didn't feel that he was in the wrong. He glared fiercely at Ji Dong and said, "Just you wait." With that, he turned and ran towards the Bartenders Guild. The bartender Wei Hong's expression gradually eased. He looked at Ji Dong and couldn't help but ask, "Little brother, do you really not have a teacher?" Ji Dong said calmly, "I don't want to say the same thing twice. I hope that the people of the Bartenders Guild won't disappoint me." Wei Hong sighed and said, "It's good for young people to have drive, but don't be too arrogant. That won't be good for your future development. I'm only a 4-star bartender, which isn't much in the guild. Although the 3 suns reflect the moon technique isn't easy, there are still many outstanding bartenders in the guild who can do it. Little brother, let me give you a piece of advice. It's better to know when to stop. I'll have Night Sorrow apologize to you. With your ability, I think that even becoming a 5-star bartender wouldn't be a problem. After all, this is your profession. Why bother going against the guild?" Ji Dong shook his head and said, "I won't take back what I said. Also, bartending has never been my profession. It's an art that I pursue. Let me also give you a piece of advice. If you always treat it as a means of making a living, then you'll never be able to make the best cocktails." Well said. At this time, 7 or 8 people walked out of the Bartenders Guild. Night Sorrow was at the back. At this time, his expression was much more respectful than before. Walking at the front was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He was tall and slender, and his face was like jade. When he appeared, the first thing that Ji Dong noticed was his hands. They were a pair of white and slender hands. They looked a bit like a girl's most beautiful white hands, but they were much larger. The fingers were long and smooth, and the joints weren't protruding. Just these hands alone made Ji Dong secretly nod. In the end, there were still capable people in the Bartenders Guild. Looking at this person's chest, there were 7 shining golden stars that formed the shape of the Big Dipper. Behind him were also 5-star or 6-star bartenders. Chapter 38. Seeing this person, Wei Hong hurriedly went forward and said a few words in his ear. Ji Dong's 6 senses were extremely sharp, and he heard all of Wei Hong's words. The other only described what had just happened and didn't exaggerate or hide anything. The middle-aged man in the lead nodded when he heard Wei Hong's words. Wei Hong immediately retreated to the back. The middle-aged man strode forward and quickly arrived in front of Ji Dong. At this time, there were more and more onlookers. More than half of the street was already blocked. The middle-aged man smiled slightly and said, "Hello, little brother. I am the vice president of the Central Plains City branch of the Bartenders Guild, Chen Xiao. May I know who you are?" Ji Dong. Ji Dong's answer was very simple. He only said his name. Chen Xiao smiled slightly and said, "I have already heard about what happened just now from the bartender Wei Hong. First, I represent the Bartenders Guild to formally apologize to you for what Night Sorrow said before." As he spoke, he actually bowed slightly towards Ji Dong. Chen Zhao's actions instantly received unanimous praise from the onlookers. "Great Master Chen Xiao, Night Sorrow wanted to defend himself but was stopped by Chen Zhao's slightly cold gaze. "Great Master." Ji Dong's mouth twitched. He had seen many people who called themselves great masters, but how many true great masters were there? Chen Zhao's hands did attract his attention, but in his eyes, this was far from enough to be a power that could be used against him. Chen Xiao still had a smile on his face and said, "The 2 words, Great Master, are just praise from my friends. This one doesn't deserve it. However, little friend Ji Dong blocking the front door of the Bartenders Guild doesn't seem to be appropriate. How about we go in and talk? You can use the 3 suns reflect the moon technique. I sincerely hope to be able to invite you to become a member of the guild." Ji Dong shook his head and said, "There's no need. I have no interest in joining the Bartenders Guild. Please take a look at my words. If you don't dare to accept my challenge, I can just turn around and leave. If you accept, Mr. Wei Hong has already told you the outcome of the bet." As soon as he said that, the group of advanced bartenders behind Chen Xiao immediately rebuked him. If the Bartenders Guild didn't accept the challenge in front of so many people, wouldn't they be admitting that they were inferior to Ji Dong? What face would they have left? But even if he won, Ji Dong was only a teenager, and it would give people the suspicion that he had an unfair advantage. Chen Xiao couldn't help but frown as well, and he said, "Young brother Ji Dong, do you really have to force us? You're forcing me?" Ji Dong smiled. He did not respond to Night Sorrow's provocation. With a smile, he stared at Chen Xiao and said, "I forced you, so what? If you have the ability, you can do it too." This was the pride of the god of wine. This was the first time that even Kar and Bissau had seen this side of Ji Dong. That strong confidence and arrogance that left no way out also infected them. Chen Zhao's expression turned cold, and he said, "If that's the case, then please state the rules. How do you want to compete?" Ji Dong smiled faintly and said, "There isn't much equipment here. I will only use one method of mixing wine. If you can do it, or if you can do it to a similar level, then you win. If you can't, then you lose." Chen Xiao did not say anything else. He took a step back and made a gesture saying, "Please." Even though Ji Dong was only 14 years old, being able to use the three suns reflect the moon technique was enough to make them take him seriously. Moreover, from the looks of it, the method that Ji Dong suggested was extremely beneficial to the Bartenders Guild. In the field of bartending, everyone had their own cocktail that they were good at. There was no doubt about this. Right now, there were 7 or 8 people on the side of the Bartenders Guild. As long as one of them could use the same method as Ji Dong, they would win. Chen Xiao had already thought it through. Not only did they have to win this competition, they had to win beautifully. They could not damage the reputation of the Central Plains City branch. Ji Dong calmly took out 9 high-wave glasses from his storage bracelet and placed them behind the 9 shakers. When Chen Xiao saw the storage bracelet on his hand, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of surprise. He thought to himself, this youth is not only a bartender, but also a yin and yang magician. Could it be that he is a disciple of a large family? Fire element? A noble of the Southern Fire Empire? Naturally, Ji Dong did not know what the people in front of him were thinking. After placing the 9 high-wave glasses on the table, he turned his wrist and a bottle of wine appeared in his hand. It was a transparent and colorless 15-year-old vodka. When he opened the 9 crystal shakers, everyone from the Bartenders Guild, including Chen Xiao, had a serious expression on their faces. They were all experts, so they could naturally tell that Ji Dong was using 9 shakers to mix cocktails at the same time. There was no doubt about the difficulty. When mixing cocktails, one must ensure a stable technique in order to mix the various ingredients in the shaker in the best way and complete the mixing. Using multiple shakers at the same time required the control of each shaker when mixing cocktails. The Bartender Guild had a total of 9 star exams. One of the most basic exams was to mix a cocktail at the same time. The number of stars a bartender had to use at the same time. Of course, this was only a basic exam, but it showed how difficult it was for Ji Dong to choose 9 cocktails at the same time. It was one of the exams that only 9-star bartenders had to take. Chen Xiao thought to himself. He could manage to use 9 shakers at the same time, but even if he tried his best, he could not guarantee success every time. If this young man really did it, the Central Plains City branch would lose face today. It was a pity that the branch president was not here. With his 8-star strength, he should be able to deter this young man. A fine layer of cold sweat began to appear on Chen Zhao's forehead. He secretly prayed in his heart that Ji Dong would not be able to make the cocktail this time. As the saying goes, when a connoisseur reaches out his hand, there is nothing he can do. When Ji Dong picked up the vodka bottle and poured it into the 9 shakers, all the bartenders began to watch his movements attentively. Ji Dong's hands were not as beautiful as Chen Zhao's, but they were extremely stable. His eyes were like the most accurate ruler. Not only did the vodka pour 9 times in a row, but not a single drop spilled out. Moreover, the liquor in the 9 crystal shakers was exactly the same, no more, no less. The crystal flask was colorless and transparent, and it was done in front of so many people. It was impossible to use any trick. Moreover, Ji-dong's movements were very slow, as if he was deliberately letting everyone see what he was doing. Vodka took up 4/10 of all the ingredient. Ji-dong poured in 3 more ingredients, 1/10 of raspberry syrup, 4/10 of Cointreau orange-flavored wine, and 1/10 of lime juice. Without a doubt, the 4 ingredients that Ji-dong used were the most common ones used to make cocktails. According to the proportions that he distributed, the bartenders of the Bartenders Guild in front of them, even the lowest-ranking Night Sorrow, could recognize this cocktail. Night Sorrow curled his lips with some disdain and said, "Isn't it just a glass of Sunfall?" At this time, not only were there more and more people watching, but many low-level bartenders from the Bartenders Guild also walked out and surrounded the back. How could they not know that high-level bartenders had appeared together in front of the door? This was the first time that someone had come to challenge the Central Plains branch to a bartender. Even now, Ji-dong's movements were still calm and unruffled as he covered the flasks one by one. Night Sorrow was disdainful of this ordinary cocktail, but the expressions of the senior bartenders, led by Vice President Chen Xiao, became more and more serious. They all knew that the better a bartender was, the more they could show off their superb skills in mixing ordinary ingredients. Different bartenders mixed the same ingredients, and the taste would definitely be different. Ji-dong had chosen to mix the fallen of the sun, so there had to be something unique about it. After covering all the shakers, Ji-dong's movements stopped. He quietly looked at the 9 shakers in front of him. At this moment, everything in the outside world had been completely isolated. In his eyes and consciousness, there were only the existence of these 9 shakers. His breathing rhythm also adjusted accordingly, and his spirit was completely at its peak under his effective control. Perhaps influenced by Ji-dong, the surrounding people also quieted down. They all widened their eyes and prepared to see what skills this young man who dared to publicly challenge the Bartenders Guild had. Ji-dong took a deep breath. Under everyone's gaze, he finally began. His right hand flashed, and he had already grabbed the first shaker. With a flick of his wrist, the shaker flew into the air, followed by the second, the third, all the way to the 9th shaker. Even though there were a total of 9 shakers, Ji-dong's lightning-fast movements didn't give people a sense of abruptness. When the last shaker was thrown into the air, the first shaker also fell. Ji-dong took half a step back, and with a flick of his left hand, the shaker that had fallen first flew into the air again. Moreover, it spun rapidly in the air. His arms were fully extended, and he caught the shakers one by one before throwing them into the air again. He stood firmly on the ground without moving an inch, but his upper body began to sway like a lotus leaf in the wind. With his waist as the axis, he swung his arms. His waist, back, shoulders, arms, palms, and fingers, every part of his body began to move. The 9 shakers miraculously began to dance around his body with extreme dexterity. In the beginning, it was still possible to see it clearly. Sometimes it was left, sometimes it was right, sometimes it was up, and sometimes it was down. But soon, everything turned into an illusory brilliance. It was no longer possible to see where his hands and arms were. Only the sparkling orange-red shakers could be seen dancing and changing in the air. Exclamations of surprise rose one after another. To the public, everything that Ji-dong was doing was simply a miracle. Those were 9 shakers. Even the slightest mistake would immediately lead to the collapse of the shakers. However, the shakers continued to revolve around his body like dragons, and they were spinning rapidly like orange-red discs. Ji-dong was like a whirlpool of power, constantly sucking these shakers and manipulating them like his arms and fingers. His eyes were as calm as still water, and he did not look at these shakers. The position of each shaker was under his control. As they danced and surged rapidly, the orange-red radiance became more and more intense, and the crystal shakers reflected dazzling brilliance under the sun. Suddenly, Ji-dong shouted softly, and his movements doubled in an instant. Even an experienced bartender like Chen Xiao could not see his movements clearly. He only felt that Ji Dong's entire upper body had left countless afterimages. In the resounding exclamations of the public, the 9 shakers seemed to have stopped in the air, forming a parabolic arc, and at the same time, they stopped rotating rapidly in the air, like 9 suns shining on Ji Dong's head at the same time. Of course, the 9 shakers could not stop. All of this was created by Ji Dong's amazing skills. Boom, thunderous applause sounded. Even the city guards, who had rushed over upon discovering the sudden gathering of the crowd, could not help but cheer excitedly. No one was willing to destroy this miraculous scene in front of them, and the people of the Bartenders Guild were already dumbfounded. Bang, 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 amidst 9 crisp collisions, the 9 suns in the sky seemed to have fallen at the same time. Amidst the 9 soft sounds, they landed steadily on the table in front of Ji Dong, and the position where they landed was exactly the same as when they left, as if they were originally there. Ji Dong's upper body swayed a few times before he gradually stabilized. At this time, the calmness in his eyes had turned into an unparalleled fanaticism. He succeeded. Yes, he succeeded. In this reborn world, for the first time, he used one of the most complicated bartending techniques in his previous life. Not long ago, he used this technique to amaze everyone at the International Bartending Conference, establishing himself as the pride of a generation's god of wine. After living in this world for 4 years, he finally completed it for the first time. At this moment, the blood in Ji Dong's body was completely boiling, and steam was even rising from his head. Sweat flowed down his face, but it was all worth it. In fact, Ji Dong could have used a slightly simpler bartending technique to complete this challenge to the Bartenders Guild, but he did not do so. What he wanted was the limit that no one could match. When he wrote on the white cloth, he had already decided to use this technique to restore his bartending skills to its peak. Even if he did not have the slightest confidence in the beginning, he still made this choice. This was the pride of a generation's god of wine, the pride that belonged only to Ji Dong, and it turned out that he had succeeded. Chapter 39. The cheers did not stop because of the end of Ji Dong's mixing. Instead, they became even more enthusiastic. All the citizens and even the city defense army were clapping hard. Even if their palms were already red, they didn't notice it. It was too wonderful. To them, the previous scene could only be described as a miracle. Even though it was just on the side of the street and there weren't any more dazzling decorations, Ji Dong's unparalleled technique had already conquered their hearts. As he panted slightly, the excitement in Ji Dong's eyes gradually faded. He lowered his head and looked at his hands that were trembling because he had used too much strength. An extreme sense of pride welled up in his heart. Even when his will had merged with the 2 great sovereigns, he had never felt such pride. Everything that had happened in this short period of time was everything he had pursued in his previous life for more than 30 years. This was the achievement that he had worked hard to achieve. Chen Xiao didn't speak. His face was already as pale as ash. Not to mention creating the situation where the 9 suns were suspended in the air, even using 9 shakers at the same time was extremely difficult for him. Right now, he couldn't speak at all and didn't know what to say. The group of bartenders behind him had already sunk into silence. However, their gazes were still focused on the 9 shakers, staring unblinkingly at them. Even though they knew that the Central Plains City branch had lost today, and had lost very badly, as bartenders, after witnessing such a miraculous scene, they couldn't wait to taste the taste of the fine wine that had been made with this miraculous technique. The way Night Sorrow looked at Ji Dong had completely changed. In his eyes there was no longer any disdain. Instead, the flicker in his eyes wasn't resentment, but fanaticism. It wasn't inferior to the expression that Ji Dong revealed when he finished mixing the wine. Ji Dong's breathing gradually calmed down. The magic of the origin yin-yang corona circulated, stimulating his arms to gradually stabilize and no longer tremble. Frankly speaking, if it wasn't for the dragon's blood, Ji Dong definitely wouldn't have rashly tried this top-notch mixing technique. After all, he wasn't even 15 years old yet. It was difficult for his body to compare to the peak of his previous life. It should be known that in order to obtain these top-notch mixing techniques, Ji Dong had never stopped training his body in his previous life. He was especially good at yoga. Without excellent body stretching and muscle explosiveness, there was no chance of practicing this top-notch mixing technique. One by one, the lids of the shakers were opened. Even now, the liquor inside the shakers was still swirling. It could be seen just how intense Ji Dong's mixing technique was. He carefully poured the liquor from the 9 shakers into 9 high-wave glasses. When he finished all of this, there was another wave of exclamations from the surroundings. This time, the exclamations clearly included the high-ranking bartenders of the Central Plains City branch. 9 high-wave glasses, 9 cocktails made with the same ingredient. At this time, the colors that appeared were all different. From the first glass's light yellow to the last glass's orange, the colors of the 9 sunsets gradually changed. Each glass was a bit darker than the previous one. Arranged horizontally in a row, the 9 gradually changing colors were like a colorful belt of light that was breathtaking. Just looking at it with one's eyes, it was already a beautiful visual enjoyment. It was even more difficult to guess what kind of taste they would have. For these bartenders, this strange scene in front of them was simply unimaginable. At this moment, they fully realized that Ji Dong's mysterious mixing technique was not as simple as it looked. It also contained a special method that had been tempered hundreds and thousands of times. They watched Ji Dong pour the ingredients into the 9 cocktails. At this time, such a situation occurred, especially when it was made at the same time. What else could they say? Raising his head, Ji Dong looked at Chen Xiao indifferently. He made a gesture and said, "Please have a taste." Chen Xiao raised his head and watched Hyoheim move. His lips were tightly pursed, but he did not step forward. The fact was already in front of him. Even if he was unwilling to admit it, he had no reason not to. "There's no need to taste it. We've lost." When these words came out of Chen Xiao's mouth, they seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. However, he had to say it. In his heart, there was even more indescribable admiration and hatred for this young man in front of him. He hated this young man for causing the Central Plains City branch of the Bartenders Guild to lose face. However, he also admired this young man's miraculous mixing technique. At this moment, he completely understood that everything that Ji Dong said previously was not exaggerated at all. His pride completely came from his strength. He still clearly remembered Ji Dong's words, "With strength, you can do it too." That's right, if I had such strength, I wouldn't just be the vice president. Perhaps only Lord Dusikong would be able to compete with this young man. Ji Dong smiled faintly and said, "Since you've admitted your loss, today's matter ends here. I'll give these 9 cocktails to you. Car Bissot, let's go." In this life, he had once again used the shoots the 9 suns technique perfectly. He was no longer in the mood to pursue Night Sorrow. He did not need Night Sorrow to kneel to him, nor did he need to take off the Bartenders Guild's emblem. The 9 suns that were placed here was enough to prove everything. After saying this, Ji Dong used his storage bracelet to put away the 9 crystal shakers, but left the 9 cocktails there. He turned around and walked out of the crowd. "Wait a moment, esteemed bartender sir. Can you tell me what technique you used just now?" Chen Xiao hurriedly caught up to him and asked. He had already used honorifics to address Ji Dong. Those who were stronger came first. This was respect earned by strength. Ji Dong said without turning his head, "This technique is called the shoots the 9 suns. If your Bartenders Guild's wine god Dusikong thinks he can do it, have him come to the Heavenly Stem Academy to find me." After saying this, Ji Dong squeezed out of the crowd under the protection of Car and Bissot and walked away amidst the cheers. Chen Xiao stood there silently and said, "Shoots the 9 suns, What does E shoots the 9 suns mean? Heavenly STEM Academy? Knight Sorrow silently walked forward and knelt in front of Chen Shao with a plop. He said, Master Chen Shao, today's matter started because of me. The branch was humiliated because of me. I am willing to accept any punishment. Chen Shao looked at him with a complicated expression, but he still helped him up and said, Yes, you made the guild lose face, but you also let us see this unimaginable godly skill. As for the punishment, we will wait for the president to come back to discuss it. Knight Sorrow looked in the direction that Ji Dong and the other two had left in. A light flashed through his eyes and he said to himself, Heavenly STEM Academy? Ji Dong, we will definitely meet again. Chen Shao solemnly ordered, Bring this table back to the guild. Don't let a single drop of wine spill. In the crowd, there were already people asking to buy the 9 cocktails, but Chen Shao didn't have the heart to pay attention to them. He faintly felt that the 9 cocktails that Ji Dong had left behind were extremely important to the guild's future. He was even more anxious to taste what these 9 cocktails would taste like after being made with that mysterious technique. Boss, you're too strong. I've never felt so proud before. Bissot excitedly grabbed Ji Dong's arm and looked at Ji Dong with a face full of worship. If he had to describe his current appearance, then there was a phrase from Ji Dong's previous life that was the most suitable: celebrity chaser. It wasn't just Bissot. Carr also had a feeling of being unable to control himself. He grabbed Ji Dong's other arm and laughed foolishly. He said, Boss, when are you going to make us that kind of wine again? Don't even talk about drinking it, just looking at it is so pleasing to the eye. Ji Dong looked at the two brothers with a bitter smile. Don't shake me around, I'm about to fall apart. I'll make it for you when we get back. Right now, I just want to find a place to stay, eat something, and rest. Aren't you tired after sitting in the carriage for so many days? Bissot laughed heartily. We're too excited to care about being tired. Let's stay in that hotel. As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed diagonally ahead. Looking in the direction of his finger, Ji Dong and Carr couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. When they looked at Bissot again, their eyes couldn't help but reveal some doubt. It was a 5-story, square-shaped hotel. The decorations were resplendent, and even in broad daylight, it gave off an oppressive feeling of nobility. Although the building couldn't be considered unique, the materials used were definitely the best. The exterior walls were built with the same colored granite, and the main entrance had 8 large pillars carved out of white marble. All of these showed its status and value. Although this was the largest city in the continent, buildings of this level were still rare. Without a doubt, its price was directly proportional to its appearance. Whether it was Ji Dong or Carr, they weren't rich. Bissot, are you sure you're not mistaken? We're staying here? Carr asked impatiently. Bissot laughed mischievously. Of course I'm not mistaken. The conditions here are so good. Moreover, it's very cheap. I've been here before, so don't worry. Very cheap? This time, even Ji Dong couldn't help but feel doubtful. Bai Su pulled them forward and said, You guys just need to follow me. Carr and Ji Dong had no choice but to be forcefully dragged by Bissot into this hotel that couldn't be cheap no matter how you looked at it. As soon as they entered, the first thing they felt was a sea of gold. All the decorations in the lobby were mainly gold, and the atmosphere of elegance and wealth was extremely shocking. When the 3 of them walked in, they immediately attracted the attention of the staff inside. When one of the staff came up to say something, Bissot swiped his storage ring and took out a black card with golden patterns. He handed it over and said, 2 rooms. Seeing this card, the staff's expression immediately changed. He respectfully received it and invited the 3 of them to the front desk. Ji Dong's heart skipped a beat. He said, Bissot, I've never asked you, what does your family do? Bissot laughed and said, A small business. A small business? Ji Dong raised his eyebrows and pointed to the price on the board behind the front desk. He said, The cheapest room here is 30 gold coins a night. How small is your family's business that you brought us to this kind of place to stay? We can't afford it. Car, let's go. Car nodded and said, That's right, we definitely can't afford it. He was about to leave with Ji-dong. Bissot was anxious and quickly pulled them back. Okay, I'll be honest, okay? My family's business isn't small. The Fire Cauldron Chamber of Commerce was founded by my grandfather. This hotel is also my family's business. We don't need to spend a single cent to stay here. Hearing the words Fire Cauldron Chamber of Commerce, Ji-dong was a bit better. After all, he didn't know much about this world. However, Car's expression changed greatly. He said, Damn, the Fire Cauldron Chamber of Commerce is your family? That's one of the top 10 chambers of commerce in the continent. Their business extends from our southern Fire Empire all the way to the northern Water Empire. You're the young master of the Chamber of Commerce? Alright, boss, let's stay here. Ji-dong asked curiously, Is Bisu's family very rich? To what extent? Car raised 4 fingers and said, 4 words will do. Rich enough to rival a country. This guy is simply an enemy. I want to beat him up right now for hiding it from us for so long. Bissot had a wronged expression as he said, Actually, I'm innocent. If I told you earlier, would you still be friends with me? My family's business has nothing to do with me. Apart from this free card that allows me to eat and sleep for free, my father only gave me 300 gold coins when I left. He also said that if I don't make a name for myself in the Heavenly STEM Academy, there's no need to go back. Our family has a rule that after the age of 18, we have to rely on ourselves for everything. Only after achieving a certain level of achievement will we have the qualifications to inherit a part of the family's business. That's why I can only use this free card for 4 more years. I have the right not to use it, and it will become invalid when it expires. Boss Car, you don't need to be polite with me. Ji-dong said, So you're planning to be a merchant in the future? Bissot scratched his head and said, I can't say for sure right now. However, I'm the only son, so I'll still have to inherit the family business in the future. Ji-dong nodded and said, Even if you want to start a business in the future, it's not a bad idea to practice and learn some of the Devil Master's abilities. At least you can protect yourself. After the rooms were booked, even though they were in their own hotel, Bissot and Car still stayed in the same room, while Ji-dong stayed in the other room. The 3 of them were tired from the journey, so after a simple meal, they returned to their respective rooms to rest. Tomorrow was the entrance exam, so they had to keep themselves in peak condition in order to face the difficult exam. Chapter 40. Flaming Bar. Red lotus petals bloomed and swept up Ji-dong's body, disappearing silently from the luxurious room. Ji-dong could not help but take a deep breath as he stood firmly in the familiar red world and sensed the surging fire element in the air. As his strength gradually increased, he grew closer to the fire element in the core world. He was no longer the frail young man who could be roasted at any time. To Ji-dong's surprise, the flaming bar was actually waiting for him on the rock platform in the center of the Earth's core. Her gaze was filled with desire as she looked at him. Flaming Bar, what's wrong? This did not seem like the Flaming Bar's style. Ignoring the fact that she had suddenly refused to see him a few days ago, even under normal circumstances, she would only appear after he arrived. This was the first time she had waited for him like this. The Flaming Bar pouted her red lips and said with some dissatisfaction, Ji-dong, you're hiding something. What's up with your shooting the 9 suns today? Only then did Ji-dong come to a realization. He laughed, so it's because of that. My body wasn't up to par in the past, so I couldn't use it. It's all thanks to you soaking me in dragon's blood that my body is strong enough to use that technique. I'll make it for you to drink now. The Flaming Bar blinked. Only then did her anger turn into joy. She said, That's more like it. But it's only for a day. Alright. As long as you like it, you can do it anytime. However, it's a little troublesome to make the shooting the 9 suns. I need a table. The flaming bar smiled. That's easy. Just cut a rock. Perhaps only the flaming bar could say that it was easy to cut a rock that was far harder than steel. The temperature of the Earth's core lake was already very high. Although Ji Dong was already extremely resistant to fire, he was still drenched in sweat after making the shooting the 9 suns. He began to cultivate tiredly. Standing beside Ji Dong, she quietly savored the different flavors of each glass of fallen sundae. The flaming bar's gaze remained on the slightly pale young man. She stood there for a few hours. By the time Ji Dong woke up from his cultivation, the glass on the rock table was already empty. However, the flaming bar was still standing there, silently watching him. When Ji Dong raised his head and saw Raging Flame's calm gaze, his heart felt as if it had been struck fiercely. His gaze suddenly became a little blurry, and even the pleasure of absorbing a large amount of fire elements had been thrown to the back of his mind. He softly called out, "Raging Flame, have you been standing here waiting for me?" "Ah!" The flaming bar woke up from the silence. She said, "I'm not waiting for you. I'm thinking about something." Turning her head away, she did not let Ji Dong see the panic in her eyes. She did not know why, but ever since she saved Ji Dong from the hands of the snow dragon, Feng Shuang, his position in her heart seemed to have changed. In the past, the flaming bar only treated Ji Dong as an interesting little friend. Now, he was even more like a family member that she could not bear to part with. When the flaming bar turned around, her expression had already returned to normal. She did not let Ji Dong see any flaws in her expression. She said, "Ji Dong, your ability is still far from enough. After soaking in the dragon blood, your body will be much tougher than an ordinary person's. You will also have a part of the dragon's self-healing ability. Although you cannot be compared to a real dragon, your body will be much stronger. At the same time, the dragon blood has also increased your body's resistance to various elements. Although Feng Shuang was an ice dragon, I have neutralized the element in the dragon blood. Therefore, apart from having a strong resistance to the fire element, you also have a certain resistance to the wood, earth, metal, and water elements. Regardless of the yin or yang element, you can resist all of them. However, your overall strength is still very weak. You can't slack off in your cultivation. I'm the queen of the underground world. It's inevitable that I'm not around to deal with some matters in the underground world. Even when I'm not around, you can't slack off in your cultivation. Do you understand?" Ji Dong understood that the flaming bar was reprimanding him for being dispirited for the past few days. He blushed and nodded. Whenever they talked about cultivation, the flaming bar would obviously reveal Her Majesty as the queen. At this time, she was more like a teacher than a friend to Ji Dong. Flaming Bar said, "Go back, it's almost daybreak in the human world. You now have 4 benchmark skills. You have to practice diligently. The requirement to obtain the next benchmark skill is to use each of the 4 benchmark skills 1,000 times. At the same time, your mana must reach 2 crowns. This 1,000 times is different from what you used previously. You must use the Bing Wu Primordial Yang Sacred Fire and the Ding Si Underworld Spiritual Fire to count. The next time you come, you can directly practice the skills. When you practice the 2 sovereign skills, it is also a tempering of the fire element. Your mana has risen to level 14 because of the previous 9 days of hard work." Ji Dong asked, "Flaming Bar, how many benchmark skills do the 2 sovereign skills have in total? When will I be able to learn their hit skill?" The flaming bar smiled indifferently and said, "Don't you understand? The skills of the 2 sovereigns are called standard skills because you don't have enough magic power. As your strength increases, every standard skill can be a hit skill. When you use their skills together, their power will far surpass normal hit skills. However, you might as well learn some normal skills from the Heavenly STEM Academy. After all, the skills of the 2 sovereigns consume a lot of magic power. When you don't need them, it's not bad to have some normal skills to hide your true strength." Just like the fireball you just learned, it's more practical. Ji Dong nodded and said, I understand. Flaming bar, I'll go back first. Goodbye. Pieces of red lotus rolled up. Just as Ji Dong was about to be teleported away, the flaming bar suddenly said, Ji Dong, remember, every time you make a cocktail for me, it can't be worse than this one. The E shoots the ninth sun that you made is very good. Everything in front of him was fiery red, and the sound of the flaming bar echoed in his ears. Ji Dong's body had already been teleported away. He really regretted it now. Why did he have to compete with the Bartenders Guild for no reason? Can't it be worse than the E shoots the ninth sun? Even he only knew a few of these top-notch techniques. If he wanted to make a better cocktail, he would have to work hard on the ingredient. However, the better the cocktail with the ingredients, the higher the price. He didn't have any income now. Moreover, some top-notch cocktails could only be found by chance. They couldn't be bought even if he had the money. Of course, Ji Dong wouldn't tell this to the flaming bar. No matter what the flaming bar wanted, as long as he could do it, he would try his best to satisfy them. As for the difficulties, that was his own problem. When he returned to the hotel, the sky outside had just brightened. Feeling the peak state of the dual elemental magic in the origin yin-yang crown, Ji Dong couldn't help but smile. Ever since he condensed the origin yin-yang crown, his cultivation could be said to have advanced by leaps and bounds. The 2 sovereign marks helped him increase by 1 level, and the remaining 3 levels could be said to be the result of his unremitting efforts. In just 2 months, he had advanced to level 14. Although the process was arduous, it was definitely worth it. Only by winning 2 championships could he obtain the next benchmark technique. This was the current goal that Ji Dong was working hard towards. Taking advantage of the balance of yin and yang elements in the early morning, Ji Dong rested for a while. When Bissot and Carr came to knock on his door, the 3 simply ate something and left the hotel. Bissot had already asked the Fire Cauldron Hotel branch of the Fire Cauldron Chamber of Commerce. The Heavenly STEM Academy was in the northern part of the Central Plains city, occupying a very large area. Due to the size of the Central Plains city, it would take nearly an hour to reach it on foot. Therefore, the 3 left early and took the hotel carriage straight to the northern part of the city. Sitting in the carriage, looking out the window, Ji Dong and the other 2 couldn't help but sigh at the magnificence of the city. When passing through the city center, they could vaguely see the heavily guarded pale golden walls of the Central Plains Empire. Although it was early in the morning, there were already a large number of people on the wide street. Business people were busy opening their doors, and all kinds of work were busy eating breakfast by the roadside. It was a very lively scene. As it turned out, it was a very wise decision for them to leave early. Even if they took the carriage, it still took them more than an hour to reach the northern part of the city. 3 young masters, we've arrived. The carriage stopped. The driver lifted the curtain and respectfully made an inviting gesture. Ji Dong and the other 2 jumped down from the carriage. Bissot said to the driver, You can go back. If we pass the assessment today, we should be able to directly enter the academy. While Bissot was talking to the driver, Ji Dong's gaze was already cast forward. His eyebrows slightly twitched, and his eyes subconsciously revealed a glimmer of surprise. Just 100 meters in front of them was a tall wall. Compared to the palace they had passed by earlier, it was slightly shorter, but only by a little. The wall before them was at least 8 zhang tall. The wall itself was pale yellow, and although it wasn't as luxurious as the pale golden color of the palace, there were 10 strange and incomparably dazzling totems carved on the wall that stretched as far as the eye could see. Every 10 totems formed a group, and they extended endlessly to both sides. Just the carving alone must have cost a lot of money. One must know that on the 8 zhang tall wall, the background of each totem was at least 10 zhang long. This was definitely a grand siege. Judging from the width of the wall, it was at least 1,000 meters wide. Such a grand scale was probably only second to the palace of the Central Plains Empire. With a single glance, Ji Dong saw the third fiery red phoenix totem in the first group, and the fourth was a blue serpent with wings on its back, the soaring serpent of the Fu Hua series. The other 8 totems were also extremely exquisite. From a distance, just the wall alone gave off a majestic pressure. Without needing any introduction, Ji Dong and the other 2 immediately understood that the wall before them belonged to the Heavenly STEM Academy. As expected of an academy jointly funded by the 5 empires. Even in Ji Dong's previous life, he couldn't remember seeing any academy of such scale. Carr said, "Boss, the main gate is over there. Shall we go over?" Ji Dong nodded, and the 3 of them walked along the wall towards the main gate. It was about 200 meters long and 50 meters wide, with granite as the main body, marble as the exterior, and jade carvings as the decorations. On both sides of the huge gate, there was a row of large words. On the left were A, C, E, Gung, and Ren, which represented learning during the day of Yang. On the right were B, D, G, Xin, and Gue, which represented learning during the night of Yin. In the middle of the gate there were 4 large golden words, Heavenly STEM Academy. In front of the gate, 10 young men and women around the age of 20 were lined up in a row. In front of each of them was a table with a piece of paper on it, and behind them was a banner, Freshman Assessment Registration Point. Needless to say, these 10 men and women each represented a department. To register, one just had to go to the corresponding department. Whether it was because it was too early, or because the number of students accepted by the Heavenly STEM Academy was too few, there weren't many people in front of the 10 tables. Ji Dong and the other 2 quickly walked over. Since they were already here, of course they had to register first. They could also understand the rules of the entrance exam and make preparations so that they could have a head start during the exam. When they got close, the 3 of them couldn't help but be a bit stunned. Sitting behind the 10 tables, among the young men and women representing the various departments, there were actually 2 that they recognized. Sitting behind the 3rd Fire Department's table was Zhu Gui's older brother, Zhu Tian, who had pleaded for Ji Dong during the final exam. Zhu Tian was older than them by 5 years, and was now a youth nearing 20 years of age. And the other person they recognized made the 3 frown. Sitting 1 seat away from Zhu Tian, behind the 5th Earth Department's or Yang Department's table, was shockingly the Bartenders Guild's 2-star bartender, Night Sorrow, who had been fiercely slapped in the face by Ji Dong yesterday. Right now, he was wearing a bright yellow school uniform. He didn't have yesterday's arrogance, but when he saw Ji Dong and the other 2, his gaze clearly changed. Bissot said in a low voice next to Ji Dong's ear, "It's that Night Sorrow. Why did he come to the Heavenly STEM Academy? This guy won't use his position to get revenge, will he?" Ji Dong shook his head and said, "Let's wait and see. He's from the 5th Earth Department, different from us. Let's register first." As they spoke, the 3 of them took out their recommendation letters from the dean. Ji Dong and Carr went to Zhu Tian's table, while Bissot went to the next table, in front of a slender female student with long pink hair. "Zhu Tian, do you still remember us?" Ji Dong took the initiative to go forward and greet Zhu Tian. Zhu Tian froze for a moment. Although he didn't recognize Ji Dong at first glance, he recognized Carr. After all, Carr's figure was very obvious among his peers. He quickly came to his senses and said, "You're called Carr, right?" "You are." After all, he had left the Fire Academy for 3 years, and he had only met Ji Dong once, so naturally he didn't have a deep impression of him.